It is Thursday, February 13th, 2020. Welcome to AM Live, the show that kickstarts your day with all that you need to know about as far as current affairs is concerned. And being Thursday, we'll be talking about matters in the markets. And today we are discussing the subject of the budget policy statement being tabled before the National Assembly. Of course, this is a build-up to the June 2020 budget statement. So I have a panel with me and we'll be unpacking some of the details which are contained in the BPS for 2020, looking at some of the provisions it is tabling, including, among others, the proposal for an audit of all tax exemptions extended to parties between 2014 and 2019. So these are some of the things we shall be looking at, and also delving into the headlines making news across the papers. That is from the Daily Nation to the Business Daily to the Standard and many others. So we'll be unpacking all this and bringing you some of the stories that you should be looking at and some of the things we'll be following up in terms of a build-up from the developments of yesterday. And welcome to AM Live. Right, once again, welcome to AM Live. It is Thursday, February 13th, 2020. And let's kickstart by looking at the news making headlines in the dailies. If you look at the Daily Nation, expectedly it is a spread in terms of Go Well Mzee Moi. This is a farewell to the late former President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, who was buried yesterday at his Kabarak residence. And just looking at some of the things being captured here, Gideon Moi takes the mantle. Of course, we saw yesterday that he was given the rungu which President Moi used to have. Emotional send-off, we're looking at some of the tributes which were given by some of the key stakeholders, people like Dr. Sali Kosgei. We had President Uhuru Kenyatta speaking, Deputy President William Ruto, the Right Honorable former Prime Minister Raila Odinga also spoke. And 19-gun salute and fly past for the former president, and just giving you all the details. Also in the Daily Nation at the top here, you can see Tuju injured in a road accident. This is, of course, happened yesterday when he was heading towards Kabarak, and of course, unfortunately, he was involved in a road accident, and we're told he's still in hospital but in stable condition. So this is a story we'll be following up today, just to look at how that is unfolding. Still on the Daily Nation, you look at governors on collision course with budget boss. We are definitely getting into the budget cycle, and some of the things which are normally coming up at this time is the division of revenue subject. So this is something which we shall be following up, just to see how this develops in the weeks and days ahead. Looking at the Standard newspaper, the cover page here is on Kwaheri Mzee, certainly the same theme which has been carried across most of the dailies, giving their souvenir edition here, looking at the developments of yesterday at Kabarak, and some of the speakers who looked at the matters here around the former President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. Says colorful State House send-off from Mzee Moi. Of course, here you can see President Uhuru Kenyatta and First Lady Margaret Kenyatta here, just standing beside the casket before it was taken to Kabarak. And certainly a very emotional moment for the country yesterday. Of course, this is a development which really polarized this country. But all in all, we say may he rest well. And we thank God for the opportunity to have been here at this time. And military honors being given the spotlight here on the Standard newspaper. The former president will be interred at his Kabarak home in Nakuru, will be accorded full ceremonial honors. This, of course, was written yesterday, so just highlighting some of the key themes which shaped the discussion yesterday at Kabarak. There is a pullout here on the late former president, so you definitely want to grab a copy of this and take a look and see some of the key issues which have been highlighted as far as the burial of the former President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi is concerned. The People Daily, looking at the same issue till we meet again. At 4:30 p.m. yesterday, retired President Daniel Arap Moi's body was lowered to the grave at his Kabarak home after Kenyans from all walks of life united to pay their last respects to the former president. Also highlighting some of the key dignitaries who attended this burial, presidents from across the region. So definitely some key themes there to look at in terms of the developments of yesterday at Kabarak, which stole the headlines entirely. Still, if you look at the People Daily, state seeks investors to put up beer plants using millet. This is trying to woo investors into the manufacturing sector in the country. So the People Daily is at least putting some focus on the subject of manufacturing in Kenya and how this can be revitalized given the challenges that we have been facing as a country. Moving on to the Business Daily, The Business Daily here looking at Safaricom eyes big score with 5G network launch. This is something which has been a matter of intense debate in the country just to see whether the country is ready for this kind of rollout. So Safaricom taking a big step here. So it's looking to cement its market positioning. And still on the same Business Daily, consumers feel the pinch, paying more for rice, milk, and as farmers are expressing doubts in terms of their production. So we have had the locust invasion, and this has threatened some risks on the agriculture space, and that is a matter which is being highlighted by the Business Daily. And still on the Business Daily, more hospitals face probe over fee fraud. You'll remember last week we had the development around the Nairobi Women's Hospital and how it was brought to revelation that it was exploiting patients to try and break in more revenue. So more hospitals are coming under the spotlight based on this subject. This is something which is being discussed in the Business Daily. Controller of Budget 6 casual workers' records from counties. We believe that this is just trying to streamline the subject of pending bills, which has been a headache for the government. And of course, earlier this year, President Uhuru Kenyatta gave a directive in terms of sorting out the issue of pending bills. The Business Daily also looking at issues around the coronavirus. Yesterday we had Boeing issuing an alert in terms of the dent this is likely to have in terms of air cargo lifting. So that is a story which is being discussed in the Business Daily. And finally, looking at the Star newspaper here. Looking at the splash again, going back to the subject of the late former President Daniel Arap Moi. Moi picked Gideon as his successor, and this is certainly taking a political twist to the whole discussion and seeing how developments unfold from here going forward in terms of the political chessboard and the alignments we are likely to see as far as this is concerned. On the Star newspaper still, Kenya-China trade to drop on coronavirus spreads. This is something which is eliciting so much concern in terms of the risks that the global environment and countries such as Kenya are facing given their ties with China in the East. So definitely a subject you want to dig into and see what this potentially means for yourself or for your business. And that takes us to the end of the newspaper review. Those are the headlines which are shaping discussion for that matter. And now let's look at some of the stories which are making headlines in terms of the news coming across our way. So after 9 days of mourning and flags flying at half-mast in recognition of former President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi's death, Kenya's longest-serving head of state has finally been buried. His body now rests in a grave next to that of his late wife Lena Moi at their Kabarak home. The forces that the country's second president commanded for 24 years bid him farewell with a final 19-gun salute. Leila Mohammed looks at the burial and service which had military and civilian rights.
A 19-gun salute in honor of a former commander-in-chief, one accorded to a civilian but one who is viewed as though he was a commissioned officer. The long reveille and the last post that entails the blowing of the trumpets twice to symbolize the passing of an officer who, according to the military circles, does not die but simply rests. After ceremonial activities, the late former President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi's body was lowered into the grave next to his late wife Lena's, as he had desired. Then wreaths were laid on the grave. First to do so were the family members, and on to the head of state and the First Lady down the ranks. Before the 7-kilometer journey from the Kabarak University grounds to the Moi homestead, a final service was held where the former president was eulogized and praised.
Na mzee ambaye kutoka niwe kijana mdogo sana, na mzee wangu Mwenyezi Mungu akamchukua bado tukiwa vijana. Huyu mzee alisimama nasi akatushika mkono mpaka tukafika pahali ambapo tumefika.
Mzee Moi alipenda kanisa. Alipenda kanisa lake, alipenda Biblia. Alisoma Biblia. Na leo hii Mzee Moi aliniambia tutabea watoto wake wote Biblia.
Former Prime Minister Raila Odinga went on to perform a ritual similar to what his father, Jaramogi, did when Mzee Jomo Kenyatta passed on.
I must send him off as a true African and say, Yawa parurulo, lowangetek, yawa parurulo, lowangetek. E woi gimicham we mari gimodong tokir kigen. E woi gimicham we mari gimodong tokir kigen. Choge joy, 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 joy.
The military on its part had its mark well cut out at the service. The color, order and activities at the military and civilian rights that were being accorded to Mzee Moi stamped the presence of the forces.
Moi, we can say without a doubt, built the most disciplined, professional army, not just in Kenya, but in East Africa and in Africa.
For one last time, the Kenya Defence Forces officers get to do their duty to take the remains of the former Commander-in-Chief of the Kenya Defence Forces, who served them for 24 years, as he goes to his final resting place. The trumpet sounded. Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi's song has played out. Now he rests. Leila Mohammed, NTV, Kabarak in Nakuru County.
And still on the subject of the interment of the former president, the burial of the late President Moi birthed a new chapter in the politics of Kenya. A make or break for a group of individuals he brought together by his political ideology and fatherhood. They are commonly referred to as the Monica Moi Orphans. For this group that has existed and thrived under the late president for at least 3 decades, for the first time, they will have to fend for themselves politically without the counsel of the late Moi. Ken Mijungu reports they don't only constitute as political but also ideological children.
This burial took with it a political mentor for many, most of who have for close to 30 years looked up to the late President Moi for guidance and political shelter. They have grown under his wings, developed socially, politically and economically due to their close association with Moi. But now that is a closed chapter. In 2002, when Moi exited power, the vacuum was apparent. The void his exit created was not easy to fill. In fact, his preferred successor, President Kenyatta, one of his political orphans, had to chart his own path. His close association to Moi was touted as his undoing, and his rejection by the voters confirmed the electorate wanted nothing to do with the retired president. Yet, almost 2 decades later, Moi remained relevant. Long queues were witnessed at his Kabarak home in Nakuru and Kabarnet Gardens in Nairobi. The queues consisted of individuals looking for political counsel, validation, and blessings. Leaders spent hours seeking his attention, and the list was closely vetted, for it was believed his endorsement was as good as an assured victory politically. With Moi out of the picture, the options are limited. Either the political and ideological orphans pave their own way or exit the political stage. The biggest casualty could be his biological son, Gideon Moi, whose proximity assured him of a conclusive win and growth in his political career in Rift Valley. Gideon will now have to be his own man if he has to stand a chance in the future.
She looks at me and says, "You know, Dad, you know these Vijanas, I've got 2 boys, Kimo and Keegan. She says, Vijana, you know, they'll take you to our people's home.
President Kenyatta is another of Moi's political orphans. He was handpicked and tailored to fit his current job as head of state. Moi offered him counsel and guidance, and even in his later years, President Kenyatta paid homage to his godfather. He is the only one who enjoyed unrestricted access to the former head of state. Though Kenyatta cut his own cloth eventually, his success is attributed to Moi and Moi's relationship with his father, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, and by extension, Mama Ngina Kenyatta.
Nimewahi kupata mawaidha ambaye nimeyatumia maisha yangu yote ya uzima.
William Ruto, a student of Moi, who later became rebellious in the eyes of many, is said to have fallen out with the teacher, the professor of politics, when he failed to manage his ambitions. His intention to become president did not sit well with Moi and his handlers, and Ruto became the first political casualty of the Moi orphans. His attempts to see Moi were frustrated to Moi's final days on earth.
We became his last bonds in politics. We saw and learned many things from Moi.
Retired President Mwai Kibaki and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga are among the other orphans of Moi, but those who managed to succeed him without his help. While Kibaki is retired, Raila Odinga may for the first time run against the Moi establishment without him being around. In Moi's sunset years, Raila was a constant figure in Kabarak, seeking what many would say was political blessings. It's also whispered that Uhuru only agreed to work with Raila after Moi's blessings.
Nilimwona yeye kwa mara ya kwanza nikiwa mtoto mdogo. Wakija kutembelea Jaramogi alikuwa amewaita.
The others are former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka, former Agriculture Minister Sally Kosgei, and Moi's last Vice President Musalia Mudavadi. For this team of family, it's a new chapter on their own. Though they have gone ahead to work together and sometimes differently and against each other, until the 4th of February, they were united under one roof, Moi's house. Ken Mijungu, NTV.
And moving on, Jubilee Party Secretary General Raphael Tuju has been admitted to the intensive care unit at the Karen Hospital following an early morning accident yesterday along the Nakuru-Nairobi highway on his way to Kabarak to attend the late President Daniel Arap Moi's funeral. Tuju underwent emergency surgery at the Kijabe Mission Hospital before he was airlifted to Nairobi. Tuju was injured alongside 17 others, 14 from the matatu that collided head-on with his vehicle, his 2 aides, and 1 person from a vehicle that was following Tuju's car. All casualties in the matatu are being treated at the Kijabe Hospital. Mel Miendo with the details.
6:36 a.m. Wednesday morning, the grisly road accident at Magina along the Nakuru-Nairobi highway. The black Prado was CS Raphael Tuju's vehicle, involved in a collision with a 14-seater matatu as he was heading to Kabarak to attend the late President Moi's funeral. The matatu was en route to Nairobi from Nakuru. At the time of the accident, Tuju was in the company of his driver and bodyguard. His 2 aides were airlifted to Nairobi and are receiving treatment.
So the matatu driver, as he was trying to swerve to avoid hitting the personal vehicle, it went to the lane where the Mheshimiwa car was being driven, or where they were heading.
They started streaming in at around 6:36 a.m. Of the 18 casualties, all of them are now stable.
Among the 18 are the driver of the PSV, 14 passengers and another passenger who was in a 3rd vehicle. Tuju's family were airlifted to Kijabe Hospital after he was reported to have undergone surgery. He is said to have suffered multiple injuries which led to the delay of his airlift as doctors sought to stabilize him.
He's stable. He's undergone an operation just to stabilize him, and therefore now we've determined him stable enough to be airlifted to, again, a hospital of his choice.
Cabinet secretaries and leaders close to Tuju were present at Kijabe Hospital. Sports Cabinet Secretary Amina Mohamed, whose vehicle drove behind Tuju before the accident, was at the hospital from the early morning.
I was actually in conversations with him, and he was talking to his family throughout. He was talking to his friends as well. He was talking to his colleagues, And so I think all of us just need to pray for him.
He's good, and we pray to God and ask Kenyans to pray for him and also for the other patients so that they can be well.
After receiving treatment from the Kijabe Mission Hospital, Jubilee Secretary General Raphael Tuju is now being airlifted to Nairobi together with doctors from Kijabe Hospital and his family. For the other casualties, they remain here at Kijabe Hospital as they continue to receive treatment.
The ICT Ministry will be the official channel of information regarding Tuju's health. Mel Miendo, NTV.
Godspeed and quick recovery to Raphael Tuju. On to matters business, and really to set the stage for our conversation, only farmers registered under cooperative societies allied to the Kenya Planters Cooperative Union will have access to the 3 billion shillings Coffee Cherry Revolving Fund aimed at revamping the ailing sector. NTV's Kevin Mutai now gives details of what stakeholders attending the African Fine Coffee Conference in Mombasa have to say about this initiative.
A week after the National Treasury published the regulations which will govern administration of the Coffee Cherry Revolving Fund, the Ministry of Agriculture has given additional details on how disbursement of funds from the kitty will be administered.
All of it will be managed through an e-voucher system, an electronic system. The farmers must be registered, they must belong to known organizations, they must have a farm, they must be producing, and it will be given against their produce.
For farmers to qualify for the fund, they must be registered under a coffee cooperative society that is affiliated to the new Kenya Planters Cooperative Union. This comes despite concerns raised by certain farmers who are questioning the integrity and process of allocation.
Mechanisms have been put in place for a direct transfer of this funding to the farmer in terms of inputs for coffee industry. When you look at the setup of the coffee value chain, the farmer is a taker of the small amount that remains at the very end of the coffee value chain, and we believe that this has adversely affected the living income of the farmer, leading to a very unstable coffee production.
During the 18th African Fine Coffee Conference in Mombasa, stakeholders and policymakers involved in the coffee value chain discussed ways of breaking the barriers affecting the sector and find market for the commodity under a regional bloc within the East African community.
In the past, we have produced 140,000 metric tons of coffee, and we know we can do that again. All we need to do is give confidence to the farmers that they will get a fair price.
Under the coffee, the Intercontinental Coffee Free Trade Area, which has come up, I think that will ease the movement of coffee and other products among the countries without high tariffs.
Domestic consumption is very important to be developed in producing countries. We produce a lot of coffee, we don't drink a lot of coffee.
The deliberations are expected to save coffee farmers in the region from the dwindling prices, as well as insulate them from the middlemen who have disenfranchised their rights in the coffee business. Kevin Mutai, NTV, Mombasa.
And from coffee, let's talk about matters milk. Dairy farmers in Taita Taveta are raising alarm over the exiting of a giant milk buyer in the coast region. The farmers, who produce more than 10,000 litres on a daily basis, are concerned on where and to whom they will sell their produce. Brookside will stop collecting milk from the region as from 1st March 2020. NTV's Bill Otieno with more.
These farmers have met here for a common reason. They are not too happy with the news coming in that the biggest milk buyer is leaving the region.
Mtu kama mimi nashangaa nitapeleka wapi maziwa? Kulingalia wakulima wetu ni lita 5, lita 2, lita 10. Mimi nashangaa mtu kama mimi ninayetoa lita 100 nitazibwaga wapi? Mtu lita 2 anaweza mwaka kunwa. Mimi siwezi kunwa lita 100.
Sasa hii nasikia huzuni sana kwa sababu naona uchumi wa mahali hapa Rumingu utaenda chini kabisa.
The county's main milk processor Brookside has closed its coolant in Wundanyi and sent messages to its suppliers that it will halt operations effective on 1st of March 2019. Competition posed by milk brokers of buying milk from the farmers at 33 shillings is what is suspected to have led the exit of the giant milk company. The county government of Taita Taveta says it is willing to negotiate with Brookside over the extension of exit date to a span of 3 months.
The farmers have requested that they are given a bit of more time to look for alternative market. So we've sat with them, and we are still, as a county government, we might also request the same. We are requesting for the same, the company to give us more time so that we can establish, to have a smooth flow in terms of transition of the new of a market for milk.
According to Brookside, transporting lower volume of milk from their cooling plant in Wundanyi to the processing plant in Ruiru is an expensive entity that is not profitable. Bill Otieno, NTV, Wundanyi.
Many thanks, Bill Otieno. And now let's take a look at stories from the archives. Every so often we have this newsroom where we excavate stories from years far back rather. Now we're looking at stories from the year 2002 and take a look.
Business people are opting for the risk-free government bonds, denying the economy credit necessary for establishing productive enterprises.
They should not kill the business efforts by rewarding capital investors unnecessarily too much money. The action which the central bank is doing can be described in parliamentary language as misappropriation of public funds.
He says treasury bonds should attract no more than 7% interest. He alleges the central bank is defrauding taxpayers' money in collusion with Capital Markets Authority.
And the only thing which has killed the equity market is because the capital market is so lucratively paid for absolutely no reason at all.
Donde attributes the declining equity market investment on the competing bonds market that has recently recorded hefty transactions. The bond market has improved from an annual trading of 6.4 billion shillings in 2000 to 9.4 billion shillings last year. In that period, turnover in the equity market declined from 3.6 billion shillings to 3.1 billion shillings. Last week alone, bonds worth 2.1 billion shillings were transacted compared to equity market turnover of a meager 47 million shillings.
You can't convert from short term to long term and pay 14%. It's incredible. It's unheard of anywhere in the world, never.
Donde is remembered for proposing the Central Bank Amendment Act implemented last year. The Amendment Act regulates commercial banks' interest rates at 4 percentage points above the 91-day Treasury bill rate.
Interesting story there. I wonder where you are in the year 2002, but clearly the issues we are facing right now with the capital markets were still the issues back in the day. We're about to get to our studio conversation, and before we get there, let's get to our guest profiles and you can interact with them. Right, and that's the panel in studio, and we're focusing on matters public finance management. The budget policy statement should be tabled before the National Assembly this afternoon, and that essentially now sets the budget cycle for 2020 in high gear, given the year that is starting. And just a quick recap, we have Churchill Ogutu to my immediate left. I have Francis Mwangi right after him. Professor Atia Waris is also part of the panel, and Robert Warero from KPMG. Welcome to the set.
Thank you.
If I may start from the extreme end, Robert, the budget policy statement, some very instrumental proposals I read inside there. One of them is that the Treasury is proposing to audit all tax exemptions between 2014 and 2019. What do you make of this proposal?
Thank you very much, Julians. So I guess for you to understand where Treasury is coming from with that proposal, one needs to look at what's been happening in the country. If you look at the reports from the World Bank, there's a suggestion that the tax exemptions, actually the income tax and VAT exemptions, cost the country about 5% of the GDP in terms of total tax collection. So if you look at that against Kenya's tax to GDP collection, which is roughly today is about 15.7%. So if you think about shaving off 5%, we would actually be at about 20%, which is somewhere within acceptable range. So what National Treasury is saying is we want to get back a lot of these funds that have been exempted into the tax coffers. And that's the reason why you see them saying we are going to review this, we're going to audit these exemptions. Let's have a look at what we can bring back into the tax coffers so that we can then distribute that equally within the economy. So it's something that the World Bank has been pushing a lot for. There's also an issue around whether they have actually had the impact that is required. If you recall the issue about VAT especially,
yes,
the exempt products, there's been an argument that instead of exempting these products, let's tax everybody. For example, books. if you're a parent and you've been buying books, you realize that you've been paying more VAT. So let's stop exempting these products. Let's collect that VAT and then redistribute it in the economy to areas that require that kind of intervention. So this is fully driven by the World Bank proposals to enhance domestic revenue mobilization. So it's, for me, it's not really a surprise, because as a country, and I know we're going to be talking about fiscal consolidation, as a country, that is one component of fiscal consolidation. You need to enhance domestic revenue mobilization, and one way of doing that is to ensure that you're not giving as much away in terms of exemptions.
Okay. And just to be fair, part of the challenge that I have is this. When you look at the VAT Act of, I think it was 2013, which was passed, the whole idea was to rationalize this issue of exemptions. And don't you think that perhaps we are confusing investors, for example, because on the one hand, we thought we streamlined this issue of exemptions, then you're coming back to tell us now you want to start auditing them again? I mean, where are we left precisely around this?
Yeah, I see your point there, because, you know, if you look at the old VAT Act, we had about 470 items that were either zero-rated or exempt. That's quite a big number. Then come 2013, those are whittled down to just under 100. So, you know, you're saying we're no longer going to be exempting products. But between 2013 and 2018, there's been quite a number of items that have also come back into the zero rating or exempt category. So I do agree with you, because as an investor, what you're looking for is actually not tax exemptions. What you're looking for is a stable tax regime. If you can predict with certainty that over the next 10 years this is going to be the tax regime, then you can plan your business affairs, which is what businessmen look for. So I do agree with you to the extent that, you know, this policy sort of keeps on changing. And in fact, if you look at the 2018 Finance Act, there's something called Strategic Operating Framework Agreements by the government, which are designed to give exemptions for government-funded projects. So again, it's almost like doublespeak, when you're saying we are going to look at these exemptions, and then in the Finance Act 2018, you say we are bringing back special exemptions for certain projects. So you know, you're sort of sending mixed signals to the business community. So you're right.
Professor, your thoughts on this issue of auditing exemptions?
Like him, I'm not surprised, but I think I have a slightly different understanding of what is happening. So when you're auditing exemptions, it doesn't mean you're necessarily getting rid of them completely. You're just taking stock of what the effect has been of the exemptions you've already given in the past. So basically, when you give exemptions, the best thing to do is to actually map it out, have a list of it, know who's getting it, who's not getting it, justify why they're getting it. And then when you have them all mapped out, the next step is to allow them to run for a while. And then after they've run for a while, then you start seeing the losses to GDP that he refers to. And then you audit them to check if they are still necessary. Exemptions are not intended to be there for eternity. They're intended to be there to achieve a certain purpose. So the audit function should ideally be an audit to ensure they're doing what they're supposed to do. But now you have two types of exemptions. They're the ones that are legislative and codified, the ones in the VAT. But we also have a very difficult tax history in this country, because there was a certain point in time where every minister in the old regimes, and now cabinet secretaries, could issue exemptions. Now this has stopped, but it doesn't mean that those letters of exemption are invalid. Some of them are still in place. So auditing also now allows government to take stock of the very old exemptions still in place, and allows it time to reflect as to whether it should continue in place or not.
Okay. And Francis, just to get your sense around this, because one of the questions that we have been asked is, okay, fine, they audit, and let's say I'm found to be in a position where perhaps I shouldn't have gotten that exemption. What becomes of me?
Oh, provided, agreeing with my team here, provided they do within the framework of the legislation that is in place. For example, we usually are looking at, let me just generally look at the Income Tax Act. We have exemptions for example, a school, we call it paragraph 10 of the first schedule. So somebody comes and says, this particular school, this particular church, this particular NGO is exempted from tax. Within that framework of paragraph 10, the exemption can actually be taken back by KRA or most of the minister. We also have exemptions under section 13 and 14 of the Income Tax Act. Provided they follow the due process, then we can basically say that those ones can be removed or can be called back because they are within the framework of the law. However, what I'm looking at here is the country called Kenya, so to speak. And we might have political expediency in terms of X was given, and maybe the one which I can talk about very confidently is capital gains tax. We call it paragraph 13 of the 8th schedule. You can basically do a deal, a transaction, and then the minister comes and tells you, you're not exempted from paying tax. Now, that one is very risky if you come and call it back, because already this particular person has not been paying tax, and there's no framework of calling back the capital gains tax exemption. So that's what basically I'm saying, and there are many. Last year I did 2, and we got exemptions. So somebody can come and use that as a political expediency. You go against the law and you take the exemptions. It's just a caution to the government that you can actually set a streak of cases to court because you are taking an exemption which was validly given under the law by the minister at that particular time.
I see. Okay. And just to stick with you, Francis,
yes.
Last year, if you remember, as we do,
yes,
there was a major merger between some 2 banks.
Yes.
And of course, there was an exemption which was extended by the National Treasury.
Yes.
What was your assessment of that particular exemption?
The exemption, allow me not to discuss it because I was at the center of it. So I would basically ask somebody to do it because I was one of the advisors. So that one I'm conflicted.
Totally understood.
Thank you.
Let me bring in Churchill Ogutu on this note. As far as this is concerned, and the Treasury is really viewing this as an avenue of revenue seepage, how big a problem do you think these exemptions are?
Well, thank you, Julians. And I agree with my fellow panelists because you look at even the current financial year, looking at even the performance, you see that even the ordinary revenue has underperformed to the tune of 88 billion. So, of course, there's an underlying issue. Time and again, you hear Treasury now castigating Kenya Revenue Authority. They need to be able to meet their revenue collection targets. So you find that now, and I really applaud this measure in the draft budget policy statement. They need to go back, do an audit for the last 5 years of all the exemptions. So I think that it's about time so that they can now be able to look at areas where they can be able to even harness domestic revenue mobilization. So it's a positive step in my view.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see. And Robert, we're talking about the issue of, he's talked about targets. And if you look at the draft budget policy statement, it is projecting 2.1 trillion shillings in revenue for the financial year 2020-2021, that's starting June this year. Here's the challenge. Last year we had to revise downwards our revenue targets from 1.8 to about 1.7. Don't you think KRA is just being saddled with unrealistic targets, considering the kind of performance they always register?
You know, that's one of the issues that has come up, Julian, in this World Bank studies. And I keep referring to World Bank studies because they've actually done a very interesting study. I think it's dated June 2019. And one of the proposals there is that, guys, you've got to take a realistic view of the revenue potential of this country. Because like you say, 2019, 2020, 1.8 trillion, now we're down to 1.7.
Yeah.
And like Churchill says, if you look at the half-year performance, about 780 billion versus 850 billion. So there you already have a gap of 80 billion. Now, if you think about the potential to collect another 850 billion or more in the second half of the year, clearly not likely to happen.
Yeah.
Then now come 2020, 2021, you're talking about 2.1 trillion. That you're growing that number by about 400 billion. That's that 25% increase.
Yes.
Not even Uganda, which by the way last year exceeded its targets by about 2% in terms of revenue collection. Not even Uganda is growing like that. It's not growing at 25%. So I think it's time as a country, and I really like what the CS said, that we need to live within our means. It's time as a country we relooked at how we come up with revenue targets, because that is a recipe for disaster. And I can tell you, because I've interacted with the Revenue Authority, those guys are doing a fantastic job. And we practically all of us hate them because they are chasing you down for taxes. And one of the questions that we have to ask as Kenyans is this tax really doing what it's supposed to do? Because we are really trying to pay, and these guys are really trying to collect. 780 billion 6 years ago was the total revenue collection for this country. 7 years ago, sorry. So we definitely need to do something about our budgeting proposals. I think that's an unrealistic target, and we need to review it downwards.
Professor, on that target, and especially because to its defense, the KRA and Treasury will tell you, hey, we've come up with the turnover tax and we are expecting to mop up quite a bit of revenue on that front. What do you think?
Is a smile enough? Sorry, tax can be like a soap opera sometimes. And I feel like they are treating the economy a little bit like a guinea pig. You know, one day we are doing taxes on turnover, the other time we're doing taxes on something else, and they keep falling short on every single thing. And unfortunately, and we would, I was joking with Francis, and I was saying, actually, for once, we might actually be in agreement on things tax. But I think that the biggest problem that we are facing right now is that we put an incredible amount of pressure on the revenue collection agency. But they are not responsible for the spending. But we keep pushing them faster and harder without making sure that the spending is taking place correctly, which is what Robert is also alluding to. And you will only have a willing taxpayer base or compliant taxpayers if you have a good system in place where people can see how things are being spent and how they're being utilized. So this is already crippling the ability of the Revenue Authority to collect. But I'd like to remind everybody that last year in January, the statistics from KRA were showing that 7.5 million registered on the tax base. We have about 1 million companies. What I found very interesting is that in this discussion on SMEs, they're saying that they're targeting 2.5 million SMEs. But there's only 1 million, or is it 984,000 plus registered companies in this country.
Yeah.
So where are these other 1.5 million SMEs they are targeting coming from? It's not making sense. Already your maths is a little bit off.
Yeah.
And if you turn around and you say that these 1.5 million are actually informal sector, then what makes you think informal sector is going to pay tax? They are not registered. They don't have a TIN number. How are you planning on collecting this tax? So even the information coming out to the public is not making sense logically, as far as I can tell. The last time I looked at the data on KRA, it was October, November last year, I think they said there were only about 200 or 300,000 SMEs. So again, you're dividing that 1 million into the SMEs. So where are these 2.5 million coming from? And that's why I said it feels like we're guinea pigs. They are trying, they're failing, they're trying something else, they're failing at something else. But in the meantime, they're destabilizing everybody in the system. There is a solution. We can hit those targets. I just think we're going about it the wrong way. And there's one very simple solution to start with. You need the companies registry in this country to start registering people as entities, as companies. You need people to start getting TIN numbers attached to their national ID systems. We need to be put onto the map, because out of those 7.5 million, if 1 million are companies, and I think I've said this in the past before, we had 18 million voting in the last elections.
Yeah.
Then out of those 6.5 million who have registered TIN numbers that are human beings, there are 12 million people over the age of 18 who are not on the tax base. So here are not simple, but here are huge parts of the tax base that are completely floating. And you raise the issue of capital gains tax. We're multiplying the targets and we're failing on the targets every single time.
Yeah.
Why are we giving a capital gains tax waiver? Where is the logic? The whole purpose of a tax system should be to tax the wealthy and make sure you have horizontal and vertical equity. But you have just exempted the wealthy who own the banks, and who, by the way, I've seen in today's newspaper, profits are up. And you're now trying to collect from the SMEs. I mean, there is something missing in this system, and it's not in alignment with Kenya's constitution. We have principles of public finance that require justice and fairness.
I see.
And we're missing that repeatedly.
And still on the subject of equity, Professor, and to bring in Francis here, the discussion around the need to widen this tax base, which you've spoken about. KRA will tell you, as they have told us, that now we are having turnover and presumptive running side by side, such that the presumptive still serves the purpose of trying to harness this many small businesses into the tax net. Francis, do you think this is a proposal which is dead on arrival?
Thank you very much. I'll take you back to a few statistics about KRA performance, then I talk about the turnover tax. Is KRA doing a good job? Let's look at statistics of the tax to GDP ratio. Kenya, we are doing 18.2. When you look at Uganda, they are doing 14, and Rwanda 14, and Tanzania 12. I think Tanzania wamekataa kuokota ushuru. But having said that, let's move out of East Africa. Algeria is doing 64, Brazil 34, and Botswana 35. So we are the best out of the worst. But having said that, Prof has brought a very, very, emotive issue around the 3.8 million people paying tax on behalf of the 47 million.
Mm-hmm.
So KRA, if you do quick mathematics, should be looking at 34% like Botswana, or 35% or thereabout. So they are doing well, the best actually out of the worst. But having said that, we just look ahead and try to look at these animals which are called presumptive tax. It was there for farm produce in 1970s, 80s, and 90s, and in 2000, the presumptive tax for farm produce was repealed. However, in 2006, actually, effective date was 1st January 2007, they came up with turnover tax. And that particular turnover tax has been in existence and has not changed, including the change they did on 7th November 2019. They just added the 15% of the business permit or trading license.
Yeah.
So when you hear from the media, everybody, that this is a new thing, it's not, it's as old as Methuselah. It was a 2007 issue. If it has not brought any particular change between 2007, 2020, 13 years, I don't know which magic you expect.
Yeah.
But having said that, we have, over time, personally I was involved in a project which was involving looking at expanding or widening the tax base in Singapore and Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things they did is to map out. This is not something just to look at the trading license or the issue of looking at only the small issues of the small trader. It's a whole work that requires Prof to review the economic trends of our people. And actually for Singapore, you see the former Prime Minister, has written a whole book around that. You start mapping from Kajiado. What is the economic activity of Ole Sentou? He has 3 million heads of cattle. He's not paying tax. It's a whole review that you require to do for Kajiado, what they do. And when he has 3,000 heads of cattle, our Jiro, who is earning 16,000 at NTV, I'm not saying you pay so little, but they are paying PAYE, but this guy is not paying taxes.
Yeah.
So it's a whole mapping that is required. It is something like 6 years for review, and you internalize the economic activity of Muranga when they are growing tea, when they are growing coffee. You go to Kisumu, these particular guys who do fishing, up to what particular level are you supposed to say this is subsistence, then the other guys can pay tax. It's a whole range of things. Then the government should try to expand the economy. I think one of the things they did in Singapore was blue economy. Painting a ship, I've given this example before, requires 1,000 people, just painting. However, when you look at that particular work of repairing and painting and actually of welding, Prof, the structure of education is very funny. I have somebody who did political science, one of the family members. I hope they are not listening to this. I have no problem with the political science, but, Prof, the kind of, if you're looking for a carpenter, you will not get. The other day we were looking for welders. We had to get them from India.
Yeah.
So that's basically what I'm looking at. It's not just the issue of these presumptive tax around the trading license, I don't know, 15% and moving corporates into it. It's basically not something that is dead on arrival, to answer your question.
Professor Zaribashan, yes.
Not a rebuttal. I told you today, Francis and I are actually echoing each other, which is awesome. Francis and I have had this conversation about the welders. We're trying to build an economy of innovators. That is what the game plan is from what we hear from the government. We're trying to build the next generation. But if you look, we have, I think, at the last count, 4 master welders in this country. 4 master welders. That means we don't even have our own teachers of welding. Yeah. Now, education systems have been very much stuck to the traditional models. But we've opened up all of these TVET programs, which are fantastic. But who's teaching on the TVET program? Because if you don't have a master welder in the country training the next master welder, then we're still going to train a welder who's going to earn a really small salary.
Yeah.
We need to be upskilling people seriously. And when you come into this issue of SMEs and taxation, I can link anything to taxation. So when you look at SMEs, then who is the SME? The SME is going to be a sole proprietor of something. So your carpenters, your plumbers, your welders can set up companies.
Yeah.
They can start doing things in a formal manner, well organized. Show me a person who's not complained about their welder, electrician, plumber, or carpenter. They can't be Kenyan, right? If we don't start to formalize this informal sector in the economy, which is extremely crucial, because if your electricity goes off, your computers go down, right? There is a direct connection with what we see as lower cadre staff, which are actually not lower cadre. They are now specialized in a certain space. And if we don't make room for them in our economy, then we are not going anywhere. And I think that is why KRA is targeting the existing, because KRA is an enforcer. These sort of policy visions must come from the cabinet, must come from the cabinet secretary on finance, must come through on the instructions being given down to the ministries. And then there has to be this connection between the ministries to talk to each other and feed the information to each other. I mean, we talked about Huduma number in the past, like where is that?
Yeah, I see. And just to come back to Churchill here, I wish you had a discussion around the competence-based curriculum and how we are going about this.
Yeah.
But Churchill, we've spoken to a number of SMEs, and the challenge they cite around this turnover tax is that even the process of filing is so arduous, in the sense that perhaps if I'm not connected to internet because I need to get the iTax and what have you, as an SME, I already have a challenge. Do you feel this is another presumptive tax in waiting, considering how much of a flop the presumptive was?
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. And just to take you back to the turnover tax, of course, it's been there for 12 years, 2007. But one of the issue of implementing it were those challenges, those teething problem even with the SMEs. So hence we found that, I mean, the target was there to be 3% of the turnover tax, but it was not fully implemented. Hence the presumptive tax was brought in to at least to harness these businesses, target businesses. But I still think that even the challenges will still be there in terms of how do you adequately implement picking up this turnover tax. Of course, just on the side of that is now that issue about even what Prof has alluded to, formalizing this, formalizing the informal businesses. And one of the things is what you've just mentioned about how do you collect the taxes, because find that some of the challenges some of these businesses are having is now access to electricity, even how to be able to file those taxes on a monthly basis. So unless those issues are adequately addressed, unless even the business environment is conducive to the tune that even it can make even those businesses go out there to fully adhere to that tax compliance, we'll find ourselves even back to where the initial turnover tax regime was, whereby there's non-compliance, there's not adherence to be able to, some of these businesses to be able to file even the taxes. So as you said, and I agree with you, we'll still go back to square one.
I see.
Yeah.
I want to come to Robert just before we take our first break. And Robert, I've been looking at KRA numbers in terms of performance, and I don't think in a long time I have seen pay-as-you-earn underperforming. This seems to be a trend, unless I've gotten my numbers wrong. What's really happening as far as this is concerned?
You see, Julian, one of the things that's happening in this country is that it's a tough operating environment from an economics perspective. So what you have, and you've seen this in the media, is companies laying off people, you know, and a case in point, for example, would be the betting companies which have shut down.
Yeah.
You've heard of multinationals transferring their head offices and service centers out of Kenya. So when you have that kind of a development, PAYE is definitely going to suffer. In fact, even in today's paper, I've just seen something about the governors fighting, and you mentioned it, fighting with the controller of budget about the off-payroll payments. So I don't believe as a country we we are positioned right to collect sufficient PAYE. And in fact, one of the statistics reflect that the income tax growth rate is lagging the GDP growth rate. And that tells you, like Prof is alluding to, that the drivers of the economic growth are actually not being netted by the income taxman or the taxman. So for me, I think PAYE will continue to underperform. Surprisingly, VAT is also underperforming. I have no idea why, yet everything seems to be subject to VAT nowadays. I don't know why that is happening. But overall, when you think that income tax accounts for about 50% of Kenya's total revenue take, then you have a problem.
Yeah. Professor, on the issue of income tax, pay as you earn specifically, we haven't seen this underperforming in a while. We're now seeing a trend developing.
So every time there's a global financial crisis, so we had one in 2016, it takes about 3 years for that ripple to reach into countries that are connected to where a crisis is taking place. So the global crisis was in 2016, and remember that our currency is connected to the dollar. So it's taken about 3 to 4 years. Then you add in the instability that happened with the 2 presidential elections. You already had fear in the economy the year before and the year of, but with the second election, you then had continued fear the year after. That is the normal thing that happens in the economy. And what Robert is talking about is the movement of staff. So I can tell you the power industry has been moving all of its staff down to South Africa, because remember, with digitization, it's a click of a button. I can check my machinery in another country without actually being there. So that is also starting to move a lot of service staff away. And then, of course, we have the DTA between Kenya and Mauritius. So again, more businesses are moving in that direction as well. And this is where this mapping that we keep talking about, understanding what you're giving away, when you're giving it away, becomes crucial. And I will tell you that there was a bit of a mess when we moved the dry port to Naivasha. I don't know why no one is talking about it. I'll throw it in. But they took containers all the way from Mombasa straight to Naivasha. But those containers were meant to be dropped off in Mombasa. So now you have containers, and I understand there were hundreds of them, that were now parked in this dry port in Naivasha, but were needed in Nairobi or wherever the assembly plants were for whatever goods we were assembling. Now, immediately what happens is your assembly plant shuts down, your staff are laid off. By the time the equipment comes, remember that if I understand some of it took more than 6 months to get to the final buyer, then you've already lost your warranty period. If stuff has been stolen or it's damaged in transit, you can't claim back on it. So those are additional losses, which if you could still run your business, you would still have to lay off staff, because you're now making financial decisions on how to survive these economic problems. And these are shocks. And these companies that were affected were not small companies. These were large companies that were affected. And this is a constant problem you see in the economy. There is this almost this mapping of things taking place, but no connection as to the reality on the ground. Now the world is still in a bit of a financial crisis, which is why introduction of a new tax during an economic slowdown is the most bizarre decision I think any country would be making at this point in time. I mean, it's different if you're going to implement a carbon tax. You know, it's a social tool. But if you're going to implement a tax to collect revenue when the economy is going down and there are layoffs, then you're basically sending it further down, which is why I will come back to, since Francis was the advisor, how could you give a capital gains tax waiver? Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yes, and really just to bring in Francis, but not on that subject.
Yes.
You clearly mentioned your conflict of interest. Francis, we're clearly in a belt-tightening situation. We're underperforming in terms of revenue. Do you feel the fiscal consolidation agenda, which keeps on being talking about, is really meeting the rhetoric we see around?
One of the issues maybe for the viewers is the fact that fiscal consolidation is basically to try to deal with the issues concerning the budget deficit. At the same time, you're trying to deal with this particular animal, which we call the debt stock. So one of the areas which continues being a problem to this particular country, it's the whole agenda around reviewing those two. And some of them is the targets that we are putting ourselves in place is that currently the budget deficit is at 7.7, and by 2022 to 2023, we want it to be around 3.5. Now, the question which arises from where I'm seated is the fact that what have you put in place to deal with that?
Yeah.
I don't see, work which has been done to reduce that budget deficit, because one of them is that you need to expand the economy as a first issue. And first, in terms of expanding the economy, it depends on which area you are actually trying to expand. And for budget deficit here, one of the key areas is exports.
Yeah.
Now, you wake up one morning and you basically see 3 manufacturers have basically closed. So you'll see that. With in cement, what is government actually doing around that particular aspect of ensuring that our manufacturers stay? So that's what I'm saying in terms of fiscal consolidation. I can basically see it's government is, of course, making promises, but you can't see how that one is being backed. Let me give you the key issue which has been worrying me so much around that particular issue is, for manufacturers, number one is the cost of electricity. And I'll just give you some statistics. I like statistics because they don't lie. So for you to achieve what you're trying to do by 2023, electricity is very, very important to address the issue of exports for manufacturers. And in Kenya, for kilowatt hour is 15 bob. When you go to closer home, Tanzania is 14, of course not doing very well. Then Uganda is 10. Now to shock you, Ethiopia is 3 shillings and Egypt is 6. So what are you going to do to close that particular gap with our neighbors Ethiopia at 3 shillings and you're at 15?
Yeah.
They came up with something they are called a rebate to reduce in terms of the electricity.
Yes.
Now, to shock you, that particular formula, I don't think we understand it with Robert Waroiro. It's quite complicated. So I really don't know what our manufacturers will do about it. But it's reducing by 1 shilling and 35 cents. So 15, if you minus 1 shilling 35 cents, you get 13.75.
Yeah.
So still with Ethiopia at 3 bob, that is trying to use a water heater to heat the entire ocean. You're just basically is a drop in the ocean, so to speak. So that's the whole aspect of fiscal consolidation, trying to understand where we are coming from. Now, when it comes to the debt stock, allow me to mention just one thing. I've talked this before, and what we are dealing with debt stock in terms of fiscal consolidation, whatever the body, whether it's parliament, I think you had a question about parliament,
Yes.
but assume the panelists are going to comment about this issue. Debt just requires 5 things or 6 things. It's called papers. You just basically have to, when you're taking a debt, what is the purpose of that debt? What is the amount you're taking? What is the period you're paying for? What are the earnings, SGR? What are the earnings, SGR? What are the earnings are you getting from that project? Are they going to recoup the investment that you put in place within the period of 25 years? What is the rate of interest? And lastly, what is the security? Is security Kenya? Is it JKIA? So those are the questions we need to ask ourselves, that by 2023, if we manage to answer those questions, then we'll be at 3.5 in 2022.
Let me hold you to that point, Francis, because the discussion on debt will be actually after the break. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with more.
There is one God in the Hallelujah. She sees cheese. She sees cheese.
Cheese.
Nasikia uko na kipara smooth hadi nyuki inakuja kuslide nasema zui.
Nasikia una masikio kubwa hadi ukipita Somalia una block jua.
To outline the stem of the tree.
Gary! Oh, Gary! Have you seen Gary? No. Nope. Nope. Gary's been snail mapped. Gary! It's just one touch.
With Lipa na M-Pesa, you get more.
Lipa na M-Pesa.
Every 100 shillings spent on Lipa na M-Pesa earns you an entry into the draw. Do more with Lipa na M-Pesa.
The blind man told police officers, afade mimi sijawahi ona bangi maisha yangu yote.
hizo ma-award zikafanya watu waanze kuimbia award badala waimbe the word.
Mimi mkinichagua mtaona miujiza.
Anajifanya siku hizi.
Kimbia mara moja.
Naogopa Mwenyezi Mungu na uji moto peke yake.
Hiyo si bangi.
Richard, you'll be so surprised at what women can do.
This is delicious.
Sometimes I wonder why women hire hitmen to kill their husbands, yet they can just poison their food.
Nimeletewa.
Inaweza kuwa ni Brayo alikujenga.
Mimi napenda fungue roho. Mwenyewe ninakukufa mbaya sana. Hata usera wako unaweza mchukua, hakuna mahali utanipeleka, umesikia?
Mbona ulipanga hiyo story yote, hiyo wizi yote? Mbona kuna plans gani?
Revenge.
Taratibu Atoll Class is strategically located in Ruiru.
It's available in quarter acres and eighth of an acre.
Our email is info@taratibu.ke and our cell phone number is 0769 333 333.
Right, welcome back to AM Live. We are focusing on matters public finance. And in studio, if you're just joining us, right on my immediate left, I have Chachi Logut from Genghis Capital, I have Francis Kamau from Ernst & Young, Professor Tia Waris from the University of Nairobi, and Robert Orero from KPMG. Francis talked about public debt before we went for the break, but I want to shelve that because that's a discussion we'll be having just right after this. Before that, we had the conversation around fiscal consolidation and some of the revenue seepage that we are suffering. Robert, I want to get your thoughts on this subject of tax exemptions. And particularly last year when we saw the exemption on the NIC-CBA merger, something which many of us felt, I mean, the country couldn't afford this kind of exemption. Do you feel it was justified?
You see, Julian, that's even though we said that that's a political question, I think the first thing to understand here is that it's legal. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that exemption. If you look at the law as was amended, when you've got two businesses coming together, you can apply for an exemption and you will get the exemption. So in as much as we want to say that perhaps these businesses were owned by political or politically identifiable individuals, the fact of the matter is that the law provided for that exemption. As to whether we should have been getting that exemption in the first place is a question for Parliament, because why include that exemption there in the first place? And I think this goes back to the initial question that you had asked about why do we even have these exemptions? And Professor here alluded to the fact that we need to answer the question, are these exemptions achieving their intended purpose? I have no idea whether they are. However, my response to you, Julian, is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with that exemption.
But Robert, if you read the PFM framework, the values of the PFM structure in this country are very clear. One, it should be just, there should be equity in this. As to whether that was realizing equity is now the question here, because here we have two sizable banks, and clearly we are questioning just, I mean, can the country afford this? You know, that's a question which I think everyone can agree that this was not in the best interest of the public.
Well, first of all, if you talk about the size of these banks, if you look at a country like Nigeria, 21 banks, capitalization of about $1 billion each at a minimum. So I think as a country, perhaps even from a fiscal perspective, fiscal management perspective, this is something that we need as a country. So as to the question whether the country can afford or not, I guess that's a question for policymakers, because you are saying the law is that this exemption can be granted. And by the way, nothing stops any other person from seeking a similar exemption, provided you come within the law. Again, if we have a problem with that exemption, then perhaps, like you said, looking at this, reviewing these exemptions 5 years down the line or 5 years back, we need to say these things no longer work for us, and therefore we are stopping this. But again, if you do that, then the Kenyans that we are, we shall say, oh, this thing was just designed for this particular transaction, and look, now it's been reversed. So for me, I think, you can't win either way. However way whatever way you look at it, you cannot win. But there's nothing wrong with that, in my view.
Clearly, Professor does not agree with you.
Yeah, she was my lecturer, and I'm sure she would not agree.
Clearly, I passed him. I shouldn't have passed him. I need to check his records and transcripts.
But
yes.
Please, Professor, you have something?
So let's think about it carefully, because we have a disconnect between our legislation and our constitution. I already mentioned earlier we have principles of public finance, but you can already see that when actions are taking place, whether it's cabinet or it's revenue collection purposes, it doesn't reflect on those principles when they are rolling out and enforcing. So we already have a disconnect between the two. So if you were to ask me, is there a possibility of a court case here? Absolutely. This is contestable. The question becomes, how did it get allowed? Why did it get allowed? And who allowed it? And I think that these are questions that become very important because they got a waiver, but most companies don't get waivers. So it's not about anyone can apply. It is about who applies, who is successful, who is not, which is why, frankly, this audit of exemptions, I am super excited about it. I can't wait to see the list because you will actually, I can promise you, you will see vested interests transmitting themselves in who has achieved it, and it will be the wealthy and the powerful who have access to the two gentlemen on either side of me, the very controversial Big Four accounting firms and others who have lobbying space and power to access those spaces. But if I were to set up a savings and credit cooperative society tomorrow, and my fellow Matatu driver sets up another one, and then we try and consolidate and then ask for you will not get them. Because it's about the power and it's the game. Now let's come to another issue. He talked about Nigeria, so we really need to put that to bed. Yes, Nigeria has got 21 banks. And yes, a couple of years ago, I think it was a year ago, when central bank the governor announced that he wanted consolidation of the banking sector. But the question is, why do you want consolidation? What is the purpose behind it? So yes, you can have consolidation, but you still don't need to get a tax break for it. You just do the consolidation in peace and collect your revenue. But why are we not looking at issues of anti-competition law? Because as you consolidate and you make banks bigger and bigger, you will also start to undermine the smaller banks that are coming up. And what we are doing is we are making bigger banks out of international ones, for example, but where is our homegrown? Now let's talk about the Big Four, because you talked about fiscal consolidation. The whole purpose of fiscal consolidation is to finance your Big Four. The whole purpose is to get money rolling into your economy and sitting there. But if you're making bigger institutions that are going to have bigger linkages outside, then first you've released the tax money, so you're not getting that. But the other part is that money is now flowing out of the economy. Because the whole purpose of your tax system should also be allow money to move in the economy. If people don't have cash in their pockets, then how are they going to spend? Right? And a lot of what we've been talking about has been unpacking it. Which comes to your last question is, can we afford this? No, we cannot afford it. The world is in a fiscal crisis. Francis is terrible today. We're in a fiscal crisis, so of course we can't afford it. Yeah. They have tripled their targets. We've been listening to the target amounts so far. Please rationalize for me why we would be giving an exemption when businesses are shutting down, like Francis says, when we are not hitting targets like Robert says, and I'm waiting to hear what Churchill says to support me. This is what it is.
All right, and I want to push the envelope a bit because we're running out of time. But something very critical is happening. We have the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill before the House. And I'll start with Churchill here. There are a number of proposals in it. The first being that it wants publication of the debt register. What are your thoughts on this, Churchill?
It's a noble initiative in terms of publication of debt register, and in particular the external debt register. In terms of the domestic debt register, is something that's public knowledge. You can view it at the CBK website or NSE. Some of us who work in the capital markets, we get access to this data. But now the major elephant in the room here is now in terms of the external debt register, and in particularly what's been out in the public, SGR terms. We saw last year in October when this whole discussions about the public debt limit was being debated in Senate. Those are two-page external debt register, which to me was a big joke because it was lumping, say for instance, the multilateral lenders, the IFC, the World Bank, the IMF, and all those other multilateral lenders, and it's sort of now getting a one consolidated figure and getting the average life and something like that, or average interest rate, and also the average life to maturity, which is not helpful at least the best. And the last time we had a comprehensive external debt register was back 2014, 2015, thereabout, whereby it was looking at each and every loan that we have on the external front, line by line, is showing that if we have a loan that we got from China, Exim Bank, for instance, going to fund SGR Phase 1, it's giving us the terms and whatnot. So that's what even this Public Finance Amendment Bill number 4 is suggesting, that we need to get back to that area whereby we have a comprehensive public debt register. And this register will be coming 3 months at the end of the financial year, so that will be around September, thereabout. So that is quite a noble initiative. I hope it sails through as it is, rather than getting some complications in between. Yeah.
Francis, on that?
Maybe, and yes, covered very well around the external part of it. The part which I want to mention is around the internal part of it. And I would like to mention the issue of pensions. Now, the government could not, I don't know where these, they have been taking that particular money for pension or setting it aside, because one of the causes of that is the government actually extended the retirement age from 55 to 60.
Yeah.
And one of the things which my understanding, if I can say so, is because they didn't have that money to pay the retirees. Yeah. So I don't know whether they are going to extend again to 80 years. So, but the figures which we are playing around here is about 1 trillion. And the IMF was very categorical around this particular issue. And they said, of course, if you look at the percentage we are looking for, GDP to debt ratio, or debt to GDP, we're looking at 56. But you factor in the pension debt, if I can use that term, yes, it jumps to around 69 or 70. You'd correct me if I'm wrong, which basically tells us that most likely that ceiling you're basically now getting to the infamous debt trap. So that's something I would like the policymakers to think about, because for me it's a debt. Yeah. Otherwise, the government might actually default in payment of pensions.
Yeah, I see. Professor, I know you have to leave a little earlier. Your thoughts on this issue of the PFM amendment bill, and especially this issue of the debt register?
So I think the debt register is a good thing. Again, I think transparency in a fiscal system is very important, and I think at least this is a positive thing government is doing. It is starting to be more transparent. It is still very poor at communicating to its people, but it's getting there. So you have to give them congratulations for that. But I am of the same opinion as Francis, that this question of what is the percentage and its lack of clarity is really problematic. 10 or 15 years ago, the maximum was supposed to be 40%. Before that, it was a 25%. Now it has moved to 60%. And every time you see economy starting to falter, when we're in a crisis, this ceiling seems to go higher and higher. And how do we justify it? I've heard somebody say you can even have 120. I understand Somalia has hit over 100. So, you know, when Francis talked about, here's your debt, here's the asset that is backing your debt, then when you lose out on the debt and you have to pay it back, you lose the asset. The question becomes, if you're hitting 60%, it means 60% of our land needs to be used to pay off a loan. If you look at the figures on the ground, I think we're hitting almost $1,800 per head. So every child born in this country is born in debt. We now have oil. But if you look at Norway, every child born is born a millionaire in dollar terms. I mean, these comparisons of your debt register must be linked in with the effect it has on the growth of your economy. If you're allowing your children to be born in debt, then we will never pay it off. And you know, we have sudden emergency debts. So we take on expenditures that are that emerge as we go along, and these are not yet being considered in this as well. So I think it's very important that, and I think somebody said it already, we must learn to live within our means. We must be very, very practical about it. And this crisis is lasting longer than the last one. It has spiraled much further down than the last one. So if you were to use a biblical phrase, although I'm not Christian, it's the 7 linears. We better figure out what we are doing with these linears, and very, very carefully.
I see. And Robert, we must live within our means, and one of the proposals that we have, not necessarily in the proposed amendment bill, but came from the Treasury actually last year, is that we always have this problem in our budget cycle, where we pass the expenditure, then we start nursing the headache of, okay, how do we raise this revenue? And that is why we have the provision of the finance bill within 90 days. The proposal is that let's have these 2 documents essentially going side by side. We have the expenditure on this side, and we have revenue on this other side. What are your thoughts on this?
So for me, that's a brilliant proposal. And I actually remember sometime last year, we had this debate about when should these budgetary proposals be published. I agree with that. In fact, if you look at the amendment to the Public Finance Management Act that came out last year, I think last year September, the finance bill has to be approved by Parliament by 30th of June, so that 1st July, you're giving Revenue Authority ample time to collect the taxes. If you remember 2011, 2012, that Finance Act was actually published in January 2013, which means that for the taxes that took effect on approval of that finance bill, you basically had the Revenue Authority having 5 months to collect the tax, so it was impossible to meet those targets. So for me, I think that's a very good idea, and actually Uganda has tried it and it has worked perfectly, because what you see in Uganda is that finance bill is debated in March. Between March and May, it's debated by Parliament. So, you know, you've got all stakeholders giving their views. This is what we'd like to see. Parliament saying this is not going to work. You know, change this and the other. Come 1st of July, Revenue Authority is ready to roll. As a businessman, between March when that finance bill is published and July 1st when it becomes law, you've got those 3 months to organize your affairs if you need to transfer or merge any businesses that you require, you know, that kind of a thing. So for me, having that finance bill ready, Finance Act ready to go on 1st of July is perfect. Now, I just wanted to also add something to the earlier debate around fiscal consolidation and accountability. Transparency, which Professor alluded to. So one of the things that Francis talked about is accountability, and I think part of that debt register must tell us what is this debt going to do and how is it going to impact the economy, because we need to know that. And the other thing about it is, you might remember about 3 or so months ago, there was a dispute between Treasury officials and IMF about whether we should include the guarantees that have been given by state corporations as part of debt. Now, if you include that, and what Francis is talking about, that debt is possibly going to be about 80% of the GDP, which is crazy. And I know people have talked about Japan about 200%, but I don't think you can compare those two. One thing to note here, and the reason why this is such a critical issue, is that even though a lot of people don't have access, even I don't have access to those contracts, there's something called a cross-default clause. And that basically means if I default on her loan, then Francis's and Churchill's loans also become due immediately. So as a government, you cannot default. As a government, we cannot default. And that's the reason why everything else will stop, because we need to pay a loan. You cannot default on that. You can go and negotiate, renegotiate the loan, the tenor of the loan and all these kind of things, but you cannot default on that payment. So it's critical, and I do agree with that proposal that that debt register needs to be public. It needs to be interrogated by people so that we know what we're getting ourselves into. And the last point is, our current president, when he was Minister for Finance, he started austerity measures, because the fiscal consolidation is about expenditure cuts. So now if you look at today, nowadays I see fuel guzzlers on the road, and I wonder what happened to the Passats. Austerity measures, I have no idea.
Consistency is the issue. but staying on the subject of, just what's happening within the public finance framework, some would argue that it is more than just a sequencing game. Okay, fine, you can pass this two side by side, but we've seen instances where, like last year, if you remember the division of revenue conundrum we had between the National Assembly and the Senate, and this protracted for a while, and we couldn't even, transact business because of what was happening. Francis, if I could get your sense, do you think perhaps more could be done in terms of streamlining how we go about this PFM framework?
I presume one of the things we have in Kenya, and a bit of a problem, is about egos. It's a country which is run through egocentric behavior. And one of the things which we would like to see is a team which sits down together, develops the programs together, and is consistent. And I presume when I was listening to my famous guy, the former PM of Singapore, he put it very, very clearly that you must be communicating with each other, you must be working together, and there must be consistency. And I think that is what is actually missing. One of the issues which has happened is around the PFM Act is the whole issue of the provisions which are there within the Constitution. It's Article 217 of the Act. So the team has come up with the proposals, and they have said this is the framework which we should be working within under Article 217. Now, when you look at that, the whole discussion around those particular frameworks put in place, everybody is pulling in their direction without agreeing on what has been proposed. So most likely it's about that consistency, and at the same time around you can come up with a framework which you can agree as a country. And you'll see senators pulling in one direction, the governors pulling in one direction, at the same time the executive keeps quiet. So it's what we like to say the resonance of decisions when it comes to the PFM Act, not everybody pulling their own direction without having a consensus.
Okay. I want to ask a question out of public interest and start with you, Churchill. We are getting into this budget cycle without an Auditor General in place.
It's a concern. And one of the things that also should be in place, if you look at even the county governments, they peg the 15% based on the latest audited financial statements.
Exactly.
Yeah. So far, I think we are at 2016, 2017, if I'm not wrong. So ideally, with Auditor General in place, at least they can start auditing even the numbers for the government, which is also a basis for even disbursements to counties. So right now, I think it's based on 2016, 2017. So we have a lower audited base vis-a-vis, and all these numbers year in, year out, the revenue numbers keeps on coming up. So that's another negative item here. And also apart from that, also some of the public listed companies, they get affected based on this issue. And
because they can't release results.
Yeah, they can't release results. CBK also has its own results, is still pending, and there was a motion in Parliament late last year in regards to all these issues about Auditor General. So my feeling is it was known that the Auditor General's helm was coming to an end of August, but nothing was done about it. Right now, I think it's subject to a court justice, so that is quite a big injustice in terms of the public finance. Having said that, I would like to go back to that issue about the PFM Act and all this sequencing finance bill and also the appropriation bill, which had been tackled earlier on. And the big issue to me, I find it, if you look at the Finance Act, it's something now to ideally is to find measures of raising the tax revenues. And for the current financial year, we're looking at 37 billion directly to be raised from the Finance Act. But that said, we find that there are some other miscellaneous acts that are put in the Finance Act. And one of them in the current financial year was this issue about repealing of the interest rate cap rate. So we find that, yes, the Finance Act is supposed to raise some additional revenues. Of course, that we know that the other revenue measures are still ongoing, but now Finance Act is now to get some additional revenue measures. But we find that these other miscellaneous acts come into place, and those are the things that actually delay the process. We saw that the presidential reservation was not even on the 37 billion, the tax revenue measures, but on some other miscellaneous adjustments. So I think that's the biggest uncertainties with this Finance Act. And recall 2 years ago, we had provisional collection of taxes, which was something interim measure for those when in those months whereby the Finance Act has not been passed, and some of the tax measures had to be infected in 1st of July, others coming in 1st of January. So at least that one was in place, but it was petitioned by Okia, Omtata, and then it was ruled to be unconstitutional. So we don't have that in place. So we find that now, at least with the PFM, Public Finance Act, being tabled in April, just before 30th of June, is quite prudent in my view.
I see. Professor?
So last word before I leave. The Auditor General's position is extremely sensitive, and I think it is sometimes by design. If you look at our audit cycles, every time we're about 2 years away from the next election, there is a flood of either release of previous audited reports or there is a backlog. And so it happened in 2006, it happened again in 2012, and now it's happening again because we don't have an Auditor General in place. Now what that does is when you go into the next electoral cycle, you have a backlog of unaudited reports, and it creates incredible amount of loopholes for mismanagement of finance as you go and choose your next leader. And this is why whoever is the sitting president then becomes it becomes fraught with tension and possibilities that there is less than transparent processes taking place, and we need to step away from that perception. Whether or not it's the reality is different, but we cannot feed the perception because it will feed the disunity in the country as we go forward. But you've spoken a lot about fiscal consolidation with us, and we've spent a lot of time talking about the domestic space. But we have to keep remembering there is Vision 2030. We're coming towards the end of it. The flagship project of Vision 2030 to fund the Big Four was supposed to be the Nairobi International Financial Center. It continues to move in a rather murky space. We don't know whether there are companies registered in it or not. Is it operating? What it looks like? So they need to give us information on that as well. But we also have this added dynamic in a very bad economy of the movement towards the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And this added problem now of a decision to get into an agreement with the United States. Because that means we are removing ourselves a little bit from the AFCFTA. And I have to say, I'm not surprised we didn't win the seat of executive secretary. Because how can you be saying you're part of a union, then you go into a bilateral negotiations and you fronted somebody to be there as executive secretary? Of course they're going to reject him. And I think that these political dimensions are not playing well enough with what is being translated on the ground in the economy.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thanks, Professor, and we'll allow you to leave at that point. But let me get to Francis, and before I get to Robert, this issue of the Auditor General, and we're trying to get a sense of just how grave this is. Give us a sense of it.
First of all, to check where there's a problem. Where is the problem around the whole issue? It's because there's no provision of an acting Auditor General once this one retires or leaves at the end of their tenure. So the whole thing about should we have a clause which allows an acting Auditor General and is allowed to sign, it's missing. And the other particular point which is not there is the fact that the timelines, that you should have a substantive Auditor General 6 months, 2 months, 1 month before the other one leaves office. There should be a framework under the Accounts Act to deal with that particular lacuna in the law. So, and that's what basically has messed the whole thing, that as we are speaking, many companies cannot even announce their results because, of course, Auditor General is the auditor of the last resort. And at the end of the day, it brings the whole mess around public financial management, because accounts is a framework, is a mirror of a performance and is a mirror of public finance framework. So it's a whole thing which has been left out. But having said that, I talked about, I think somebody wrote something about the problem with Nigeria, that is Chinua Achebe.
Yes.
So we should be asking ourselves what is the problem with Kenya. And I think Churchill has mentioned that we knew all along
that his time was coming to an end.
That his time was coming to an end. Then the whole saga of you get people, you do an interview to 10 people, and then you say nobody qualifies. This country, the practicing accountants are around 900, if I'm not wrong. And the Institute of Certified Public Accountants have over 20 members who are qualified. You mean you cannot get an Auditor General within that particular population that you can say these particular people have not qualified? So it's a whole saga of what is the problem with Kenya. It's last minute, postponement of issues, and of course ego. So that's a bit of a problem that we are getting ourselves into. So we wait until we get a substantive Auditor General for us to proceed, because we are already in a quagmire.
I see. I want to just clarify that you're not implicitly placing your CV on the table. Robert, this issue of the Auditor General, your take on it?
Well, Francis says that I should put my CV. I don't know whether I qualify. But, I mean, I think my colleagues have addressed it adequately, in the sense that we definitely do need an Auditor General, because there's so many things that cannot go on without, the Office of the Auditor General, as Churchill has pointed out. However, the only point that I just wanted to point out, and this is to their credit, the Honourable Kimani Ichung'wah, MP for Kikuyu, has brought a motion to Parliament that allows county governments to draw revenue from the consolidated fund, from the Exchequer, to the extent that the Division of Revenue Act has not yet been passed. And to me, that is a brilliant proposal. Why? Because you then have, even if these two houses are fighting about how much should be shared out to these counties, then the counties don't grind to a standstill, because under the law, under the Public Finance Management Act, once it's approved, once that amendment is approved, we'll be able to draw. And actually, they draw on accounts, so that at the end of once the bill is approved, then we'll just reconcile accounts and say you've drawn X and therefore you're entitled to Y now. So for me, I think that should be able to address that. And actually, one of the amendments that has been proposed by Honorable Kimani is that has to be, the Division of Revenue bill has to be passed by 10th of June of every year. So which means we don't expect that there'll be an issue now going forward, even if these two houses are not reading from the same script. But I do agree with the sentiments of my colleagues. As a country, even as far as investor confidence is concerned, I think it's useful to have an Auditor General in office, so that they can discharge that mandate.
I see. And sticking with the matter of the devolved units of government, and coming to you, Churchill, the discussion around on-source revenue, and we've seen a bit of a struggle across many counties. And when I talk to some of the governors, they will ask you a question. I mean, it's very easy to talk about on-source revenue when you sit, for example, in Nairobi. When you go to a far-flung county, and where the situation is adverse and the economy is really at its bare minimum, how are you expected to source for on-source revenue? And even when it is put as a metric in the formula for revenue allocation determination based on your performance last year, then to a degree it influences how much you're allocated. Some have argued that this is actually not fair. Do you think that's a fair argument?
I think by and large there should be realistic targets in terms of those far-flung counties. We have 47 counties, but not all of them have the same equitable revenue or generation activities. But in the same breath, we have 8 counties which were actually singled out as quasi countries, whereby they are counties, yes, but their main towns are more or less like cities. Counties like Mombasa, Narok County, some of the big counties. Hence, rather than having the county governments now the ones now to go and get revenues from themselves, they collaborate with the Kenya Revenue Authority. They have those capacity so as to be able to harness those revenues from those counties. That's a brilliant suggestion. It came out 2-3 years ago, but we haven't actually seen it being fully adhered to or really implemented. So I agree with you that we don't have to have a blanket sort of on-source revenue targets for all the counties, but now single out based on the revenue capabilities of these counties. Not all of them are equal. Not all of them should be treated equally. Some of them, and also the kind of on-source revenues. For Narok, you find that it's mainly with the whole ecosystem around Mara River and the whole Mara Reserve. And if you go to, say, a northeastern county, you find that even the kind of revenues to be collected are not even parking, or some of them could be cess. So there are different kind of ways to go around it, but not to have a blanket treatment for all the counties.
I see. Francis?
I'm looking at Article 209 of the Kenya Constitution, and it gives what the national government should collect and what the county should be able to collect. But having said that, the whole thing about agreeing with Churchill, it's about now the issue of innovation. Many countries have decided to come up with a framework of working with counties and ensuring that they collect part of the income tax, then they retain a portion. And it's one of the areas they have used to expand the revenue growth. agreeing with Churchill that some of them actually cannot be able to have, credible income that you can be able to call own source. So it's an ingenious way of doing it. It's an innovation that needs to be looked at, because when you're looking at Wajir County, and Ali has about 3,000 camels, then you cannot be able, it's very, very hard for you to tax that particular person. So the bit of what I was talking about, mapping out, and you have county, be able to reach out to Ali, and you tax that particular person within the framework of amending that Article 209, then they retain a portion, then they pay the rest to the county government. So that's what has happened in the countries, including countries like Malaysia. They have tried to explore what to ensure that there's a sustenance of counties. The one which I fear most is Article 212 of the Constitution, which basically is giving counties a leeway to borrow, but guaranteed by the national government.
Yes.
Now, having said that, and I'm not running away from your question of own source revenue, because they are somehow related, it's like the government should ensure that by the time they are allowing that particular county to borrow within the framework which has been provided for guaranteeship, then it should be very, very careful that the county can be able to actually repay. Lastly, for me, is like, they've been having this particular debate whether Nairobi should be a county. And I still have my own convictions that Nairobi should be part of the national government because of the areas we are looking for. It's a very, very important county for us, and it is basically the epicenter of what is happening, and there is actually a lot of duplication of functions when it comes to the whole issue of own source revenue. So it's a big confusion. So, and because it's a very big area, you'll see now a bit of conflicting. Actually, the governor of Nairobi, if actually he's in opposition, you usually see a lot of back and forth in terms of how you run the county for Nairobi. So for that one, because of the collision, I still believe because of the nature of our country, the orientation and the culture should be part of the national government to avoid that collision.
Okay. Robert, on this issue of on-source revenue for the counties?
Yeah, and I agree with what the two gentlemen have stated, and like my friend Francis here, it's usually useful to have a look at the statistics. The statistics suggest that counties only collect about 43% of their target own source revenues, which tells you immediately that these counties are heavily reliant on central government, and then it goes back to the conundrum that we were discussing earlier about how much is central government being able to mobilize in terms of taxes and what have you. So I do agree that we need to look at the capacity of these counties to generate own source revenue, and like he says, innovation. And I think another example that you could potentially use is the US, where you've got the federal tax and you've got the state tax. So it's just that our constitution basically says county governments, you can raise income from property taxes and entertainment taxes. Now, you remember Kiambu when we had the chicken slaughtering levy or something of the sort.
Yes.
How are you even going to enforce that? So that tells you the difficulties that these counties have in terms of generating own source revenue. But I also think that another quick win would be, for example, because they're allowed to raise property taxes. When was the last time that we had an updated valuation roll? So that you can then start levying the land rates and the rents and what have you as a county government. But again, this goes, it's almost like a chicken and egg situation, because most taxpayers will ask, what amenities are you providing for me in order for you to even increase the taxes? So it becomes a bit of a difficult conversation for county governments to say, well, we're increasing the property taxes because we've done the road or whatever it is. So it's a bit of a challenge, and I think governors definitely have some work cut out for them, because if you can't even pay your wages as a county government, are you an economically viable unit? And that's a question that we should be asking.
Okay. And now, as we get to the tail end, we are getting now into the thick of the budget cycle, and one of the key issues we normally receive from the private sector, should I say the investment community, is that Kenya's key challenge is that every financial year you will have new taxes being rolled out depending on where the government feels it can net in more. So today I'm a business operating in this framework. Come June, I will be subject to a very different kind of regime because of the targets being set by the government. When you look at the year going forward, especially towards June, and some of the targets which have been set, for example, proposals in the budget policy statement, Do you see a risk where we could again encounter surprises come June? And of course, the Treasury is looking to see where it can tighten a few bolts.
Most definitely. Just starting from the target of right now, I think we are at overall target of revenue is around 2.08 trillion, and we are looking at going to around 2.1 trillion. So there's an 100 billion increase in overall revenue. Of course, there's a split between appropriation in aid, which is now on-source revenue from the ministries, department, and agencies, and now the ordinary revenue. So there could be now some focus which we expect will come in terms of harnessing this increase of 100 billion new revenue. Of course, it comes a challenge if you look at year in, year out, the kind of revenue target that we have. It's quite ambitious. Yeah. And for instance, even in the current financial year, where we started at, and once those figures for 2018, 2019 came by, they had to revise it downwards. And hence we found all these kind of other unorthodox, which I will say, mopping up of excess cash from the parastatals to the tune of 78 billion. So you find that where Treasury is, what they are looking at to collect in overall revenue is, one, it's ambitious. So they have all this kind of, if I may call it, innovation in terms of getting new additional tax revenue measures, which we expect anyway to happen in this current financial year as it aims to meet these targets. So I'll not be surprised if we get those outlier or some of these out of the box suggestions from Treasury to as it gets to harness new revenue for the next financial year starting in July.
Okay, Francis?
Maybe I just go back to one of the quotes by a gentleman called Austin O'Malley. He said, in levying taxes and in sharing ship, it is well to stop when you get down to the skin. And I think one of the things I can mention around that is that the government has looked at all measures. They just need to stop there and now become innovative. And in terms of innovation, the first thing they need to work with is the issue of working with government and expanding the economy. And let me just start with the issue of the government in terms of the innovation. The government has a lot of framework, like e-government. We have some guys who are drilling boreholes. We have guys who are basically doing all sorts of things. The e-government and the blockchain technology is going to bring all that information to KRA so that you cut on over innovation. Yeah. Because once you wake up in the morning and you come with what Wariro calls Robin Hood tax, of course, it was dead on arrival, it could not. So it's like they are out of innovation or out of options in terms of collection of taxes. So what I'm expecting next, it's the same cycle. You try to increase a rate there, and you try to actually remove an exemption there, but there's nothing new. Yeah. So it's a whole abracadabra issues we are expecting come to the next budget cycle. But having said that, allow me to mention what the father of modern economics, called Adam Smith, talked about in his book, The Wealth of Nations. Stability and certainty. We had, in 2018, a tax law which had a shelf life of 19 days. Many countries are looking for that certainty, so that if I come in as a person who is investing in betting, yeah, and winnings, I am able to know that I have 3 years, 2 years, or 4 years to be within this tax regime. Because you are basically in this particular regime. Within the next 6 or 12 months, you don't know what to expect. Mm-hmm. So what they have done, like in Rwanda, I like giving an example because I've worked in that country for many years. They look at around 3 years, so that you read the budget and you make the changes within 3 years. So the stability and certainty is actually provided by Adam Smith. So it's something government need to check. And within those particular 3 years, you have consulted widely, you have got budget submissions, and you come up with the concrete submissions or concrete tax laws which are going to take you for the next 3 years for stability and certainty.
I see. Robert?
Yeah, I agree with Francis here that we've really pulled out all the rabbits from the hat in terms of what are the tax revenues that we can generate. So it's highly unlikely that we're going to come up with anything that is new per se. So for me, I think one of the things, and this is some of the proposals that have been bandied around, potentially looking at an increase in some of the tax rates. For example, if you recall, there was an issue around increasing PAYE rates to up to 35% and that kind of a thing, which has been done in Uganda. And there's this issue we've been talking about, equity and progressivity of the tax regime. So that's, I think, one of the areas that possibly they'll be looking at. I agree with Francis here about the exemptions regime, which is clearly is going to be coming to an end, the sunset regime. And I do agree with him about phasing it out so that it's very clear to business people and they can plan their affairs. But also, if you look at today's Business Daily, I think there's a proposal to cap the earnings of this taxi hailing apps. And for me, why I find that interesting is because if you cap it at 15% as proposed by NTSA, effectively you are saying that the driver partners will be earning more. And therefore, we go to this whole issue we've been discussing in the morning. How do we bring those driver partners into the tax bracket so that we can collect more? But I can see that as perhaps the first step for government to operationalize the digital services tax that came in last year. And as you can see, globally, it's such a problem. This digital services tax is such a problem globally. Everybody wants to tax it their own way. And Kenya, I think this will present an interesting case study in terms of raising revenues. But in summary, I would say, when you talk about fiscal consolidation, we've talked a lot about the expenditure side. The revenue side, I do not see a lot of headroom for government to raise taxes. So it's about consolidating the tax base and ensuring that almost everybody pays. And I think if of course I'm not the Commissioner General, but if I was ever there for a day, I think what I would do is that I'd look for all these graduates who are graduating and don't have employment, and I allocate them Kimathi Street, and I say, from door number 1 to door number 100, go in there every day and ensure that these guys are paying taxes. And I can tell you, because you will not be operating from your house, somehow we'll increase that tax base.
But tell me, on the digital economy, now that you brought it up, we haven't seen the regulations yet, have we?
As far as I know, I've not seen them. This, if you remember last time, Parliament kicked the can down to the CS, National Treasury. You come up with the regulations, which of course have to be approved by Parliament. But it should be an interesting one to watch. I don't know how they are going to tax that. And before the professor left, she mentioned about the trade deal with America. So clearly, most of these companies that would be affected by digital services tax are American companies. So it will be very interesting to see how that plays out when those regulations are finally out.
I see. Gentlemen, we're at the tail end, and I want to bring up something which Churchill mentioned. Last year, we saw the government directing all parastatals, surplus cash, bring it back. Francis, what did you make of this?
One of the things is I was asking myself is that surplus cash which you're talking about, are you talking about the dividends, or are you looking at the surplus which they have made? And you see, I'm just giving an example of we remove the issue of dividends because that's given. It is within the policy. So we are looking at country, parastatal like Central Bank, that you have this particular surplus revenue. Okay, bring it on board. But what I'm trying to really getting confused is that when you basically say they should bring this particular cash, was there no regulation before? So what was happening before? It's a question which I was asking myself, and I didn't have an answer. Maybe Churchill has, but was there no framework before that these particular parastatals, they are creation of an act of Parliament, and when you look at the regulation, where were they supposed to take the surplus cash? Were you supposed to keep it in the box, or was it supposed to be lying in the bank? So it's a whole confusion which actually dawned on me. But having said that, in terms of the framework which is there for the ones which are able to issue dividends within the Companies Act, then that one I support it fully. The surplus is question, was there a regulation?
But Francis, if you remember, the regulation was such that whatever you hold in T-bills, bonds, it was very clear.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that reverts to...
That is what I'm asking now. Then why declare? Because there is already a regulation. You see, it's a rhetorical question I'm asking. There was already allegation. Why declare now? These particular people are your own appointees.
Yeah.
These are your own parastators, and there's a regulation. You just basically go, and it's just like the way I was talking about the presumptive tax. Why is KRA trying to talk as is a new whatever, is a new law, even for the guys who are called landlords. It's like it was a new law, and it has been there from 1974. So that particular announcement, for me, it was, you're basically telling us that the sky is blue, and we know it's blue. So basically, just go and do it because it's a regulation.
Gentlemen, I'm told we have 3 minutes. My director tells me that. And I'd like us to get to our wrapping up remarks. If I could start from Churchill, we have been discussing the Public Finance Management Framework, expectations. There's a PFM amendment bill in place. The BPS is going to the National Assembly. What are your closing remarks?
I don't expect anything new in the final BPS vis-a-vis the draft BPS. I know even last year...
You think they never take public views into...
Well, they take, but perhaps those kind of punctuations, if I may be quite honest with them. Because I remember I sent my comments on them, but I've got a bounce back email. It just tells you how it is with the public, with Treasury. But that said, I think even National Assembly last year, they had some recommendations for BPS. One of them was now implementation matrix on the Big Four. That hasn't come out. I'll be expecting to look at even pending bill. Will it be part of the consolidated fund services? It's a big issue, a thorny issue. So those are some of the things I'll expect to see in the final draft. Otherwise, I expect the final draft to be more or less what you already have, the draft budget policy statement.
Robert?
Yeah, so for me, I think one of the things that I'm very interested in seeing is just the capacity of government generally, whether a county or national government, to absorb these expenditures, because it doesn't make sense for you to be coming up with budgetary estimates which you'll never utilize in the first instance. So that's one of them. And then the other one, which is I think a critical enabler for the economy, is just government releasing funds to counties and to suppliers, because without that, then you stifle the entire economy. And the example, like quick example I can give here is the VAT refunds. We've got refunds in the order of about 26 billion, and National Treasury allocated about 1.5 billion a month to clear it. And you know, this it's accumulating on a monthly basis. Yeah. So it's unlikely that traders will be paid sufficiently, and therefore the economy is not going to grow. So I think some of those pain points for business people are what I'm looking to see in the final document.
I see. Thank you. Francis, your closing remarks?
Thank you. Agreeing with Robert and Churchill, number one is would like to see more of development expenditure absorbed. That's a very key area which we are looking forward to. And number two, and my last one, is that when you are making submissions, we would like to face Treasury, not a team of Treasury and Kenya Revenue Authority. Kenya Revenue Authority, when we go for submission in Treasury, you basically face a team of Treasury and KRA people. We would like to see only Treasury, because KRA it's implementing. It is like having a judge going to Parliament to make laws, and actually that one is absurd. So those are the two areas I would like to see, agreeing with my team.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our studio conversation this morning on AM Live, where we've been focusing on public finance management, specifically on the tabling of the budget policy statement before the National Assembly later on today. And right now, let's take a look at True North and some of the stories we'll be focusing on today. The Institute of Economic Affairs is set to launch a study on the leasing of medical equipment here in Nairobi this morning. Elsewhere, the Communications Authority of Kenya is having a press briefing on child online protection initiatives being undertaken. Still today, there should be the opening of the 5th Africa Credit Information Sharing Conference by the National Treasury. The Kenya Bankers Association and also the World Bank is involved in this process. And elsewhere also happening today, the Kenya Open Golf Limited will be addressing the media ahead of the 2020 Magical Kenya Open presented by ABSA, which is the former Barclays Bank Kenya, this morning. And yes, still today, Google Kenya is this morning hosting the 16th annual Safer Internet Day SID, where it will launch a landmark online safety program for children dubbed the Internet Awesome. And our quote for the day is from Winnie Byanyima, the Ugandan lady, saying progressive taxation can offset the effect of growing inequality. Right, spot on with the subject we've been having in studio today. Right, and that has been the first part of AM Live this morning. We have been focusing on public finance management. I should be handing over to my colleague Gladys Kashanja, who is in the studio right now, to take us through AM Live Plus. Gladys,
yes,
welcome.
Thank you, and gentlemen, thank you for gracing us with your time. A very incisive and very informative conversation there. And I'm glad we have a panel of men, because the conversation we'll be delving into in the next hour is actually men and mental health.
Perfect.
And that is coming up your way in a bit. And the interesting bit is we will not have a doctor in studio. We'll actually be talking to men about their lived experiences. Stay with us.
We bring you Jam Down, and you know, kama kawaida tunakupatia the best of reggae and dancehall music. So we give you the best of vibes mtaani. Na unajua pia mtu yangu lazima tukupatie interviews from international countries. And you know I'm talking about Jamaica. This comes only on Jam Skype. But unajua pia show iezi malizika bila wenzetu. And I'm talking about Kaskala and More Spice.
Wale wa radio Siwanga area Nation FM toka saa 1 hadi saa 4 kukuletea nothing but hot topics na magoma kali. Good music and good vibes. They call me MC Nyawochi.
And they call me Miss Katiwa from 10 p.m. up until midnight. Remember, the hashtag is JamDownKE right here on NTV.
Don't go nowhere.
Of having cancer is worse than actually having the disease itself. How did you take that?
What shocked me most was having a colostomy. So I think having a colostomy gave me a better place to just accept the fact that it's cancer.
Is it possible to actually have this kind of cancer and you don't have the risk factor in terms of the genetics?
It's true. Probably just about 10% or less of all colon cancers are linked to somebody in your family having it.
With Lipa na M-Pesa, you get more.
Lipa na M-Pesa.
Every 100 shillings spent on Lipa na M-Pesa earns you an entry into the draw. Do more with Lipa na M-Pesa.
Sonia yampenda Jabali kiasi.
Yale wayaita mapenzi, ule wake ni wivu. Sasa mambo ya kumpenda Jabali na kumchukia huyu Fadhili yaingilia napi kwa pisini, mambo mawili tofauti.
Baba, simu yangu yenyewe ni ile wejua. Nitakesha nayo vipi na kuchaji mpaka kazini?
Jamani, mwana mrongo yuwauzwa wapi muuze mimi angalau mpate pesa za kuondoa hizi dhiki.
Mara nyingine najiuliza kati ya wewe na huyu Fidhuli wako Jabali, nani bingwa wa kuudhi?
Kwani ulikuwa haulizi kuhusu sausage kuungua?
Nilikuwa nimekuulizia kuwa mvua ikinyesha huwa ardhi ya tota.
Nimekuja kuongea na wewe.
Siongei na maadui zangu. Nishatangaza vita na wewe ni adui. Toka.
Hatutakuwa tukipotezea na muda rafiki yangu.
Akili yangu ina mambo mengi bwana.
Sasa hiyo akili yenye mambo mengi ndio ingefanya kazi haraka iyapunguze na kuyaondoa.
The three sides of Anna.
Don't you ever suddenly feel an explosion of joy bursting in your chest for no reason? Or don't you ever suddenly feel sad and you don't know why? Do you know why that is?
Already explained to me that there's nothing really wrong with her.
That's the problem with men. You never really cared about anything.
No. It's you women who turn absolutely anything into a tragedy.
But if Ana Lucia is dreaming about those things, then that is your fault.
Now why would you say that?
It is the truth. She does not find in you the love of a mother.
The three sides of Anna.
Sour Shower has never been better with the new look Sour. Now with a new formulation too that will leave you feeling fresh for longer, while the soap lasts even longer.
The best part of an adventure was sharing it with people you love. We are going to have the best time. I made a summer fun list. Whoa, that's a lot of fun. Take
Make it last forever, put it on replay. The greatest day, got something to say. Everyone
I'm gonna go snorkeling. I just invented a new sport. Hashtag Sisters Rock.
In your paper this week, America's fears. China and Russia growing influence in Africa gives the United States sleepless nights. An East African enigma. Why Moi has left an indelible mark in the region. Talos wars, Uganda and Kenya's sorrows. UK oil exploration farm financial troubles dim prospects for quick exploitation of petroleum discoveries. The return of Lissu. Behind the scene plan for Tanzania opposition politicians' homecoming. Plus our opinion leaders. Silencing the guns. Africa leaders must use AU summit to broker long-term ceasefire by Elisa Jobson. Off the bucket list. The biggest losers in Trump's fresh travel bans. Magazine. The magazine. Saving the Mara Serengeti ecosystem. Masai Mara is green again, and the village teams are working to keep it that way. The Outlook. The East African, understanding the region.
The water in the lake is not safe.
Uchafu yote nakuja mpaka baadi, samaki upatikane inakuwa ngumu.
Hatukunywi maji.
These are ikora, you see.
We are not releasing any wastewater into the environment.
Tumechoka na kupiga kelele kwa watu ya prison.
Sewer connectivity is still very low.
Government is aware of their production. Government needs to monitor where they empty their waste.
This was undercover camera. Are we going there? Nazakatwa.
We were given this lake and we're just not looking after it properly. When God comes and says, where is my lake? We say, here it is.
Top spot ndo mwanzo tu.
So much football.
It is a chance to enjoy Kenyan football.
Crunch time for the Kenya Sevens rugby team. Why Formula One?
I'm interested in cars.
The speeds that those cars attain is crazy. But I'm supposed to be a fan.
Asante sana Kigogo, karibu. Sijapata vizuri sana. Lugha gani hiyo ya Kimayai? But good to see you there.
Every day, NTV News team moves you to the center of the action.
The security forces who took part in this operation.
Police are not taking anything to chance it.
Moves you to the heart of the story to witness and record history.
Rendering the declared results null and void.
Telling the story of Kenya.
The growing importance of border in Mandera.
Matatus will be on strike.
And beyond.
The politics in the United States capital.
It is the 7th edition of the Global Education taking place in Dubai.
When it comes to business, we crunch the numbers and unpack the detail with the latest information for your investment decision.
It's time to say goodbye to ThisNote and karibu to ThisNote.
In order for the manufacturing sector to be elevated from the ground.
Despite the government's promise to create at least 1.3 million jobs.
Moves you fast past the planes and trucks to bring you the triumphs and joys of our great men and women.
Moving stories that touch our hearts.
I didn't know that I could go back to school.
The Back to School program has brought hope to these young mothers.
NTV News. News that moves you.
Good morning. Thank you for staying with NTV. My name is Gladys Gashanja and this is AM Live Plus. Our conversation for today is men and mental health. Now, my guests are already in studio, but before we get to it, you also know this is where we keep you up to date with all matters, current affairs within and without the country. And speaking of which, my colleagues from Mombasa, Kisii and Nyeri counties are with me. I'll start off from Mombasa County. Kevin Mutai, what can we expect from your end?
Well, of course, Gladys, thank you and good morning. Today is a very big day for the tourism industry. This follows the docking of a big tourism vessel, Marco Polo, from Zanzibar, with more than 600 tourists on board. The vessel docked this morning at the newly constructed cruise ship terminal here at the port of Mombasa, and the tourists are expected to visit various tourism attraction sites here in the country. A section of them have already disembarked from the vessel and are already boarding the buses and vans already on their way out to those particular areas. This is a big boost to the tourism industry, and of course also with the sector players expecting more of this vessel to arrive this year. Recently we spoke to the Kenya Ports Authority, that is the chairman, Joseph Kibwana, and he told us that this particular cruise ship terminal, ultra modern terminal, will be able to boost the sector, with of course also coming up with ways of strategizing on how to receive this ship of these cruise ships, which are, we are told that this is the first one to arrive this February, but of course others are yet to follow. And speaking on this facility constructed to a tune of 350 million shillings, will have various facilities that will be able to attract tourism, including through duty-free shops and of course other facilities which will be of great interest to the tourists. With of course also traders, I'm seeing some of them are already here with their wares selling curios and other carvings. It's a big day for the sector players. Of course also tourism companies, travel and tourism companies, they're all here, of course, offering tourism, various facilities that are expected, of course, to assist the tourists who have just arrived here at the Port of Mombasa. So it's a big day for the tourism industry, with, of course, also the sector players coming up together and urging the government to put up measures and ways to ensure that the tourists will be given assistance, and of course also have easy access to various destinations here, not only in the coast region but of course in the entire country. This particular ship will be leaving tomorrow for Seychelles, and remember it has brought over 600 tourists here in the country. So we'll be interviewing some of them, try and get a glimpse of what they're expecting to enjoy here in the country, and of course also we'll be summing up all those views in our subsequent bulletins. Of course also we'll be speaking to the tourism stakeholders here in the region, and of course also get to hear what the ministry has to say about this and the measures that it has put in place to ensure that the tourism industry continues to rise here in the country. Back to you, Gladys.
Thank you, Kevin Mutai, speaking to us from the newly constructed docks in Mombasa. That is after a cruise ship from Zanzibar actually docked with 600 tourists on board. We shall be keeping tabs with him even as he speaks to some of them to get an idea of what they expect to actually get from the experience here in Kenya. Now over to Kisii County. Janet Nyamwamu now joins us. Janet, what can you expect from your region?
Well, Gladys, a very good morning from these sides of Kisii County. And as we have seen, the rains have been pouring these sides of the country, and the weather man from Kisii County, the Kisii County Director Weather Services, Mr. Henry Sese, is alerting Kisii County residents to brave for the wet weather because the rains are going to be around till early June, and he's advising the county government to unclog the drainage system and the sewerage system so that when the rains come, when the rains continue to pound, the drainage will be flowing and the rains will not cause any havoc in the town and its environs. He is also advising the agricultural department to advise farmers on ways of farming during this wet season and storage of crops so that we cannot go on shortage of food crops. The flash floods have been will be expected this period, and the Agricultural Department has to be on high alert, and this region experiences some lightning incidences from time to time, and he's advising parents and everybody to take precautions, safety precautions during this time, so that they can advise even the children not to play under trees and to be safe all through the season. The KPLC and the forestry departments are also advised to look out for all the posts and trees growing along the power lines to avoid loss of life and property. On those living on disaster-prone areas like the Manga Hills, those who live there, we've been experiencing some mudslides. They are told to move to safer grounds to avoid loss of life. That's what the weatherman is advising the Kisii County residents from this area. Gladys.
Thank you, Janet Nyamomu from Kisii County, where she tells us the weatherman is giving a disclaimer about the continued heavy rains. As you do know that the Met Department had actually said right now there's a bit of reprieve in as far as those rains in some parts of the country, but this will continue into the month of March, and as Janet has mentioned, even over to June. Now to Nyeri County, Melita Oletenges now joins us. Melita?
Right, Gladys, in Nyeri today we expect that the Kikuyu Council of Elders will be meeting at the ASK Kabiroini grounds starting from around 11 a.m. The elders, Gladys, of course, these are elders from the Kikuyu community, and they are expected to give direction on a number of issues, starting from the leadership of the region and also focusing on economic matters, of course, in light of the recent changes made by the president and directives made by the president to touch on the coffee, milk and tea sectors. And these, of course, are some of the issues that we expect the elders will be discussing. But more importantly, Gladys, is the leadership of the region. And of course, in light also of the BBI initiative, the elders are expected to discuss a number of issues as well as give the political direction for the community here. This meeting, Gladys, also comes ahead of Dedan Kimathi commemoration, in which the county government of Nyeri is expected to unveil a memorial stone that has taken some time to build, and of course now costing the county government about 8 million shillings, and expected the president is expected to grace that event next week. So we will be attending that meeting at the Kabiroini grounds, ASK Kabiroini grounds, just to get the details emerging from that meeting, and of course also just to get the views of the elders in regards to the political realignments and alignments from the elders there, and of course just to get their view also regarding which direction they think, as the elders of this community, maybe the community should take in terms of politics, and also their say in regards to the economic situation in the region, and how their suggestion to how these should be turned around. We will be focusing on that story and any other story that will be coming out of this region today, and we will be letting you and our viewers get the details as they come. But for now, over to you, Gladys.
Thank you, Melita Oletenges. Looking forward to that. And still staying in the central region, Martin Moura now joins us from Murang'a County. Martin?
Yes, good morning, Gladys. It's a bright Thursday morning from County 021 here. And just to bring our viewer on what we are following up today for our subsequent bulletin is there's a young man, a middle-aged man, who was lynched yesterday evening after allegedly he was accused of defiling his mother. It's said that he has been doing that for a certain duration before the matter came to light. The man is also accused to have killed his father 5 years ago, was lynched and his body set ablaze by irate residents of Maragua Ridge here in Maragua sub-county, which neighbors Kiharo. Something else that I'd like to bring to our attention of our viewers is the Deputy President William Ruto will today pass by a certain burial here in Kandara, to be specific, Kagondoine in Kandara sub-county. He said that he will be attending a burial of a family friend before he proceeds to Nyeri, where he has other engagement. Something else that we are following up on is, the government has been reviving dairy farming since the CS Munya took over. Now today, farmers from Kirinyaga, Muranga and Kiambu will be meeting at Kalro in Thika, where they are expected to be trained on modern day farming so that they can be able to benefit from dairy farming. The government has put in measures to ensure that the dairy farmers do not continue to suffer, because there has been complaint that the government has neglected dairy farming, it has neglected tea and coffee. So those are some of the few stories that we are following up from this county, and we'll keep you updated as more unfold. Back to you, Gladys.
Thank you, Martin Maurer. Clearly, a whole long list on your dairy and farming is topping that list. We shall be keeping tabs with you even as you give us more details on the same. Now, let's look at what we are preparing for you, what is making it on our dairy this morning. The Institute of Economic Affairs, IEA Kenya, is this morning launching the study on the leasing of medical equipment, often referred to as Managed Equipment Services, MES. The study was done in partnership with the Open Society Institute of East Africa. The findings are expected to promote public participation on the necessary reforms towards enhancing value for money for the MES project. Commission on Administrative Justice, that is the Office of the Ombudsman, has developed its second strategic plan for the period 2019-2023 and will be launching it this morning. The event will be presided over by the Speaker of the National Assembly, and many dignitaries from commissions, ministries, departments and agencies will also be in attendance. Now, the mandate of the Office of the Ombudsman is to investigate any conduct in state affairs or any act or omission in public administration in any sphere of government, and complaints of abuse of power, unfair treatment, manifest injustice, or unlawful, oppressive, unfair, or unresponsive official conduct. The Credit Information Sharing Association of Kenya, CIS Kenya, this morning kickstarting the 5th Africa Credit Information Sharing Conference that is being held at the Kenya School of Monetary Studies. The two-day conference will bring together government ministries and agencies, financial services, regulators and policymakers, chief executive officers and senior managers of financial institutions to review the role of credit bureaus, collateral registries and credit guarantee schemes in promoting access to credit. The conference will also review case studies from emerging markets to demonstrate successes and challenges around the implementation of credit market reforms. And to some sporting action, the Kenya Open Golf Limited will be addressing the media this morning ahead of a 2020 Magical Kenya Open presented by ABSA. Now, top government officials and tournament sponsors expected to grace the occasion. The 2020 Magical Kenya Open presented by ABSA is scheduled to tee off on the 12th to the 15th of March. On to some of our developing stories, and Jubilee Party Secretary General Raphael Tuju was admitted to the intensive care unit at the Karen Hospital following an early morning accident Wednesday along the Nakuru-Nairobi highway on his way to Kabarak to attend the late President Daniel Arap Moi's funeral. Now, Tuju underwent emergency surgery at the Kijabe Mission Hospital before he was airlifted to Nairobi. Tuju was injured alongside 17 others, 14 from the matatu that collided head-on with his vehicle, his two aides and one more person from a vehicle that was following Tuju's car. All casualties in the matatu are being treated at the Kijabe Hospital, and the ICT Ministry through the CS Joe Moshero has made it clear that it will be the official channel of information regarding Tuju's health. Martyrs Health Kenya Union of Clinical Officer Nairobi branch is planning to visit Nairobi Women's Hospital this morning and issue a statement on their observations. Now, this comes even after the Association of Kenya Insurers announced that all health insurance providers have suspended services at Nairobi Women's Hospital, and the suspension will remain in force pending a thorough review of quality and cost of the hospital services. This decision follows reports that there seems to be systematic approach by the hospital to unfairly generate revenue from patients. The Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Council is currently conducting an independent investigation on these claims, even as the Nairobi Women's Board does an internal probe into those claims. Martyrs Education now, and the Cabinet Secretary for Education, Professor George Magoha, is this morning expected to preside over the Jomo Kenyatta Foundation 2020 Scholarships Award ceremony at the Jomo Kenyatta Foundation head offices. JFK has had a scholarship wing to support their secondary education for bright but needy students since its inception in 1978, or rather 1968, during which it has supported over 10,000 students. This is a welcome move considering the plight of the many students who are unable to continue with their education due to financial constraints. And Martyrs Health in another setback in the long quest to prevent HIV infection. A trial in South Africa has been shut down after an experimental vaccine that was found to be ineffective. The trial included more than 5,000 young adult men and women in South Africa and had hoped to improve on the results of a clinical trial conducted in Thailand over 10 years ago. This has been considered to be a setback for the war on HIV, but scientists say they will regroup and try again. And there are 3 other global efforts underway in pursuit of a safe and globally effective preventive HIV vaccine, including the antibody-mediated prevention studies, which Kenya is among 11 countries taking part in those results, and whose results expected later in 2020. And a walk back into history. 24 years ago today, the hip-hop legend Tupac officially released his 4th album, All Eyes on Me, on February 13th, 1996 by Death Row Records and Interscope Records. Now, the album featured 5 singles, with 2 topping #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, How Do You Want It and California Love. It made hip-hop history as the first double full-length solo hip-hop studio album released. It was the second album from Tupac Shakur to hit #1 on both the Billboard 200 and the top R&B hip-hop albums charts, selling 566,000 copies in the first week. The album then won the 97 Soul Train R&B Soul or Rap Album of the Year award shortly after his untimely death. Shakur also won the award for Favorite Rap Hip-Hop Artist at the 24th Annual American Music Awards. The album was certified Diamond by the RIAA on July 23rd, 2014. And on February 13th, 1914, the American Society of Composers, Authors and Publishers was founded in New York City. The purpose of this organization was and remains to protect the copyright and performance rights of the works of its members, composers, songwriters, lyricists, and music publishers. Now, the first director was composer and musician Victor Herbert, an eloquent supporter of musicians' rights to receive royalties for the use of their work. According to the story told about the birth of a society, the popular composer Victor Herbert became aware of the need for protection of musical creators' rights when he was visiting a hotel and overheard a musician playing a piece of music that he had written. He knew that he had not been paid for the use of his music in performance, and even though copyright law had protected against the unauthorized public performance of music since 1897. And even as we are taking a walk back into history, let's go back to the weekend that was. Award-winning Kenyan gospel musician Dennis Mwangi, popularly known as Papa Dennis, died in what preliminary investigations showed was death by suicide. Now, police say the musician fell from the 7th floor of an apartment building in Pangani on Friday night, and the singer was reportedly in a studio session at Nairobi Records, where he stormed out of the room and rushed to the 7th floor of the building, from where he fell down and died on the spot. Now, postmortem conducted Monday indicated that he died of deceleration. Now, close relatives, family members and other artists believe that the Nashukuru hit singer had been suffering from depression before his death. May his soul rest in peace. And actually, this story is what is shouldering our conversation today, even as we look at the status of men and their mental health. This conversation has been ongoing. It has been a bit of a hush-hush situation, but it is time that we actually shed light on the same, even as we come back to back with the reality of this happening in our society. Those are pictures of the late award-winning Kenyan gospel musician Papa Dennis, who actually passed on at the weekend. And as I mentioned, our conversation today, men and mental health. And let's first state some facts, even as we get into this conversation. Fact number one is that statistics indicate that at least 1 in every 4 Kenyans suffers from a mental illness at one point in their lives. And actually, this is reminiscent and also a reflection of the rest of the world, even as the WHO says that this is something that the whole world is facing straight on. And also another fact that you need to keep in mind is that the 2018 KNBTS Economic Survey said 177 suicide incidences were reported to the police in 2018. Now get this. That same economic survey mentioned that 147 men were actually reported to have died out of the 177 by suicide, compared to only 30 women. So let's have that conversation on men and mental health, shall we? And to help me do that, we have Eddie Kimani, who has lived experience with mental illness, but also is a mental health advocate. Thank you for your time. And of course, Kiaria Kimani, lived experience with mental illness also, and very passionate about telling your story. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Now, somebody once said that depression is Kenya's best kept open secret, especially when it comes to men. Eddie, do you agree?
Yes, I do. The numbers are there. WHO, World Health Organization, has its reports out, and their statistics, they're staggering in terms of even how worse it is. Unfortunately, we seem not to have consistent records that actually support these numbers. But as it is, in terms of even the news that we have being broadcasted about the occurrences of people dying by suicide and taking their own lives, especially men, it's quite astounding. But yes, those numbers they're representative of what is happening on the ground.
Okay, and Kerry, you know this is not news to you because you've walked in these shoes. When you hear the numbers and how many men are actually opting out, are you surprised?
Not quite. Simply because we have grown up, or at least I'd say in the Kenyan society, men generally have been imposed on to be stoic. So you're not supposed to cry, do not complain, do not show any form of weakness. So whatever troubles bedevil you inside your head, they are yours to keep and not the world to know. And so you don't have any other place to take this pressure. So when it becomes too much, you end up saying no one will understand, and death is an easier out. Yeah.
Okay, Eddie, even looking at the numbers, clearly there are more men opting out than there are women. And the question is, what is it that probably helps out the women that men have not tapped into?
I'm a strong believer of the fact that women have very strong coping systems. Unfortunately, men, even amongst ourselves, it's a challenge even coming out and saying, I need help, or reaching out. And as I said, we are not supposed to show our weaknesses. Even some reports indicate that there are men who would be happier going for a prostate cancer test than going to a psychiatrist. If you look at that, and it's actually a proven report coming from also a global mental health organization, which indicates that it's that bad because of the stigma and because of the fear that you might tell a friend, I think I need help with my mental health challenge, that will bring out your weakness, that it will show you have a weaker side to you. And he's very right. We are wired, of course, by the society, how we've been brought up, not to show these emotions. Unfortunately, we do not know how to be vulnerable. A bigger general and a very sizable number of us men do not understand how to embrace. And that's why you get the case of toxic masculinity coming into the place, because we are trying to prove that stoicness, trying to prove, okay, I'm a man. And you'll be suppressing all these emotions. And these emotions should actually be working for us.
Yeah.
Our vulnerability is supposed to work for us, not against us. But unfortunately, we've been wired over years and over time to always imagine I need to protect my emotions. I don't need to sit down with another man and talk about how my well-being is. Yeah, so that's where the challenge is. Women, you've got a fantastic support system, which is really works very well, and you're good at embracing your emotions and your well-being. Sometimes very unconsciously, because that's how you're wired. You've been taught how to take care of how you feel. You can easily share, you can easily open up without feeling being judged, because on the flip side for men is that we'll always feel as if we're being judged if we showcase our weaknesses, our vulnerability. But actually, if you embrace it, it actually works for you. But this is the journey that we're on.
Yeah.
It's part of the conversation.
Okay, and Kerry, at this point, you've got to ask the question, do men even know how mental illness looks like?
I would honestly say they deem it to be normal. When you don't know how to talk about what is going on inside you, it's a normalized thing, and I say normalized in quotes because it's not stuff we're willing to talk about at home. As Eddie said, women have coping mechanisms, so for them, they'll easily talk it out, and you'll notice, ata mimi, as there. For guys, between me and Eddie might either disagree or agree, or maybe bolster the point even further, is if I come and tell him things are thick, the easiest thing for him to do is buy me a beer.
Let's go for a drink.
Let's go for a drink.
Or I'll tell him, pambana na hali yako.
Pambana na hali yako.
Or kaa ngumu.
You're a man.
Jikaze kidaina.
Jikaze. And to paint even this picture even grimmer, it does not start in adulthood. It starts at childhood. So you're boys, you're playing football, and if one of you plays rough on the other, and I immediately cry, the other guys around me already branded me softy. And that's the beginning.
And that's what I meant by the wiring starts from a
very tender age. So men just don't know. So to you, you grow up knowing I'm supposed to bottle up issues. I'm supposed to keep this within me.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to talk about it.
Because I'll be judged.
I'll be judged.
Okay.
Heavy.
Speaking of judgment, in retrospect, Eddie, you've walked in these shoes too. Do you think there are pointers that you would have recognized that this is not normal?
Unfortunately, with this wiring, and as I like the way you put it, it actually looks normal. And at the time, and again in retrospect, I did not understand that mental health and well-being plays a part in how I come out as a man. So everything that was happening to me during that period, that very dark season that I went through, was me trying to fight it and trying to deal with it in my own way.
And what are these things you were fighting?
Being ignorant. And remember, I was coming back from a background where I was already in the public eye. So I've got this pressure to stay and look in a particular way. And as a man who's been exposed to that space, you'll do everything and anything to always look normal, no matter how much you're going through in life. And you could be breaking down, you could be shattering. And shattering in the sense that it also affects the people around you. In my case, it affected my family. it affected my marriage, it affected my children, it affected my siblings. So it was a situation where I thought I'm dealing with it, and this is normal, this is how it's supposed to be, and the way I'm dealing with it is the best way I can. So there was a lot of course, selfishness. The ego had grown the size of an elephant, because you think you cannot tell me how to deal with my problems. I will fight them the way I know. But now I know better. And it's just that I wish I knew this then, that there's a way I can do this, and that is by asking for help.
Okay.
Saying and raising my hand and saying, you know what, I don't think I'm okay. And that then if you told me that it's okay not to be okay, I would disagree with you. I would fight you. I would totally, just go against what unfortunately at the time, you get more of the judgment from the outside world, which not just makes things worse for you.
Yeah.
And then now your coping mechanisms actually not even helping you. They're working against you.
Kerry brings in the point of introspection.
Yeah.
Everyone is saying something is off. You need to get this checked out because this is not the normal.
Yeah.
But the guy will not look inward and say something is off, because you can make society help you.
Yeah.
But if you cannot take it up yourself, it's another different play.
Yeah. So introspection is not one of those things that naturally humans do.
Exactly.
Whether man or woman, naturally you never look towards you. You tend to think the other party
Has
is
a
on has
problem.
the problem. So you're mirroring your issues that way. They never come this way. If you look at Michael Jackson's song, he says, I'm scared of looking at the man in the mirror, because this is something about introspection, is that it forces you to look so deep within you that you'll find this ugly monster, and you're like, no, I'm not this way.
Or I'm not ready to deal with
I'm
this.
not ready to deal with this. And so you're like, no, I'll put it off till whenever. And then things become worse.
Yeah.
And when they're at the worst is when now you're like, okay, then perhaps I'm the one who's in the...
In most cases,
Yeah.
worst comes to the worst, especially now the discussion is about men. It only hits you when it's at the worst.
When you're literally crawling.
So
When you're
yeah,
flat
for example,
foot down.
if I may use my example, considering some of the trauma I amassed in life, being molested, watching my parents' marriage crumble, being expected as a firstborn to always be at the top, you're not allowed to fail. You're basic. I like to joke and say, firstborns are test tube babies. You're the experiment. So if it works for him, it works for the rest.
Yeah, that's a conversation for another day.
But when I think in 2018 December, that's when I realized now things are bad, because I was having anxiety attacks and suicidal thoughts, and it wasn't the first time. It was just, okay, now this is definitely wrong. But prior to that, there was something that led to me now having to go between stress, depression, and suicide within 1 week.
Wow.
And so, and I put a tweet, and I'm like, okay, fine, whoever sees it, well and good. And fortunately enough, the few people actually who responded were men that I have come to become very close friends with now. Yeah.
Excellent. Eddie, that rings true for you too. There is a point you
100.
wanted to opt out, but your mother was a very strong support system.
Yes, it was part of that journey, and it reaches a point where that journey, you'll try and do everything against what actually you're supposed to be doing, against what is right, because you're thinking from that manly point of view, I'm not supposed to be going through this. Let me try and do it a different way, but you're not really reaching out. So you're trying to deal in that. Remember, depression which is what I went through, is like a prison with no key, and the thoughts are the lock. So you keep on fighting with these thoughts constantly in your space, that prison. And for me, it reached a point, the first time when I tried to actually out myself is when I just I got a flick of sense, no, there's more to this than just, but I was still going through my journey, and that's when I decided, and I remember I'd gone through this, before I went and knocked on my mom's door, it had been a journey of about 2 years, between 2015 and 2016. And that period was when I just kept everything and normalized in my own way. And that now forced me, when that flicker came, got that place now to put my head down, which was just go back home. So I still had to fight with the decision that, Eddie, are you doing this? You're 39 years old. So I was already judging myself. With what will my friends think when they see me walking out of my folks' gate going to work. But I sort of now dealt with that because I could only stay in my friend's house for so long because I'd just been auctioned. I had been thrown out of my house. I just had to figure out a way. And that dealt with that situation at the time. The journey still goes on. So that helped. And she really helped in terms of just coming to terms with what I was going through at the time.
Okay, and Etta is bringing out something that is very crucial and critical in the day we are living in. The role of a man in society vis-a-vis the reality. We're living in harsh economic times. You're the provider. Everybody is looking up to you, and it's not working. Do you think this is fueling the numbers we are seeing today, Gary?
I possibly think so, to a great extent. I was just looking at it the other day. I hold a degree in finance. I didn't enjoy the job, so I figured, well, I might try to do something else. But there are many other students, especially male students, who have spent 6, 7, 4 years studying, and they come from very impoverished backgrounds or maybe privileged backgrounds. They come out here, and reality starts hitting them. There are no jobs. What are you supposed to do? Do you go back to your dad and or family to start asking them for handouts? Do you push a hand cart in the streets of Nairobi, and some of your good friends see you doing this, and they laugh at you or jeer, and they're like, oh, look at him, he's from, it's, there's this crazy expectations that we put on men. Forget even from family, but just within ourselves, even from coming from internally from ourselves, and it's unhealthy.
Okay.
It's unhealthy. It's unhealthy to exert a system beyond its limit. You have a laptop on your desk, so it's only meant to do certain things. If you push it beyond that point, guess what it does? It crashes and it shuts down. And that's the same thing. The human body, the way it's designed, it can only handle so much pressure. And if it can't get beyond that point, the brain is intelligent enough to say, you know what, shut down.
I will make.
For survival's
Just
sake.
to add to that, his point, of course, is the way now the world or the society around us reacts to us. But remember, we also now have our own self-expectations. So you're adding that expectation, Eddie, you should have been here. Eddie, you should have used that degree to achieve this. Look at them now, they're laughing at you. So you're also you're dealing with both sides. And introspection comes into play, and again, it can also either work for you or not, or not. So you're dealing with your own self-expectations in trying to make these other people happy. And you are constantly as one big budget, and you're also budgeting yourself to reach these expectations, or even just to supersede them. So it's both ways.
And we say we are our worst critics
Yes.
at the end of the day.
That much I know. It's the most self-deprecating thing that I have done to myself. Because I look at my friends and they're like, wow. He just bought a new car. He's gotten married. I'm here, I'm single. I'm living in a space that if I do this, I'm kicking my cooker. And so it's so much internal, and in your head you find that it's very shameful, when really it's just life.
It's just life.
It's just life.
Now we're talking about men trying to make it happen, keep it together. It's not working, and you're crumbling. There's something else that's also in the in the day-to-day that has changed the dynamics of it. And I believe you were at the last public hearings of the Mental Health Task Force. And one Weldon Koros from the Gaming Awareness Society of Kenya brought up the impact of gambling and betting that has fueled all this. And this is what he had to say.
Interested, me and my team was a man who gambled his dowry, all of it. Now they had to break up with the fiancé before everything.
Eddie, you were in that sitting. People laughed, but the reality of what he just said hit home. You are ready to gamble everything, yeah, just to keep the face. But at the end of the day, you are breaking and shattering many other aspects of your life. How is social media, betting and gambling also fueling this, and the connection between that and mental health?
It's been proven that men are also affected in that aspect in a very big way. And this is what we've just, the previous point we've just had, men trying to deliver their bit as men. It's not necessarily that I love gambling. It's not necessarily that I love betting. But you find men at that stage now, jobs are not available.
Yeah.
There's an avenue here which I feel, fine, it's a quick, easy, according to you as a man, to make money. But then again, it's got its limitation. So you find it gets to the point where now it's good to start having these regulations to try and control where this is leading to, because now it looks like an easy way out. But now, unfortunately, some of us men are not willing to go out there and toil for actual, just do some honest work and just get your income and support your family or support yourself. It just looks like an easy way out. So with that pressure on some of us men, you feel, I need to pay rent. Unfortunately, you will do the unthinkable, get money, even loan money to go and play, thinking you're going to make up for that. And of course, the connection and the addiction to it makes you get into it deeper, deeper and deeper. And I really appreciate what he brought up. I appreciate that a group is there championing that, to sort of just try and make an understanding that there should be some regulations that would also help, because it will play a part in helping this conversation about how it's affecting us as men, as
and
part of that mental health.
And it's a pressure point, right?
It is a pressure point.
And bringing out, there's gambling, and then you mentioned
social media.
Social media has become this marathon that we run, and you don't want to break it in 1:59. You want to break it in 1 hour. It's
in less.
Who's gotten what first? Who's done what first? I've seen people who would rather go hungry for 3 weeks straight so that they can buy a certain shoe and be said that they've got it. They're the first ones to get it. There's some people who have basically chosen to live in the most deplorable of conditions, but have certain things within their lives, a phone, a TV, or anything, just to look like they're ahead. And in the end, they're like, this is unsustainable. It becomes really unsustainable. It's the conversations we're going to have. We're going to bash each other. I'm going to look at Eddie. I'm going to pick on a physical feature. I'm a total stranger. I have never met him. And I'll hammer him to shreds. Guess what will happen? Eddie will start feeling bad about himself. He'll go away. Or if not that, he'll be like, oh, so you want us to play this game? And he'll find something else to do.
So it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, so we're just going to go round and round and round.
Vicious cycle, unfortunately. And it's a part of us now that we cannot do without social media.
Yeah.
But then again, it's the understanding of the power that it has.
The tool.
And the tool, using it resourcefully, using it well to be able to even make an income. But unfortunately, the bigger chunk of us are using it for matching up.
Yes.
And he's right. I'd rather live in that space where you can stretch your legs and touch the gas cooker, but my pictures and my images on social media platforms are trending.
So definitely another pressure point. Yes. Now, let's get into the solutions. You've walked in these shoes and you've seen what works and what doesn't work. Eddie, you put together a forum to give men a safe space to actually speak, because men have said we don't have a safe space where we can go speak. Yes. Talk about that and the importance of this going forward for men's well-being.
Well, it's true. Men, to be able to start this conversation, need a safe space and a trusted space. So we came up with a concept where we would like to collaborate, or we are collaborating with barbershops, and also, more importantly, training barbers to become mental health ambassadors. So how are we doing this? The barbershop for years, traditionally, and I can see Kimani has also.
Yeah.
we, unless you're bald or you're balding like me, it's a place where we men feel safe, and that's why you find some men would just go to the barbershop because the Kinjozi guy is his pal. They'll sit and talk about politics. They'll talk about the latest trends in the motor world. They'll talk about games, sports, Premier League, and all that. So the thinking behind this is, what if we use this space to add another conversation, which is where men use that safe space to engage about their well-being, to engage about their mental health, and more importantly, find a space where they can reach out and ask for help. So how do we do this? We empower the barber to become a mental health ambassador. We're not going to change them to therapists or psychologists or counselors. All we are making the barbers to become, of course, with their endorsement, is to become signposts. If I walk in and sit on that barber's chair, the barber would be able to know how to ask me the right questions, how to listen to me as a client, a man client, how to be able to understand what I'm going through if we have that conversation without being judgmental, and fourthly, being able to guide me to where I should go. So the training will empower the barber to be able to say, I've heard you, I understand what you're going through, and I feel you need extra help, an expert help. So they will have contacts. They will have a catalog of contacts for specialists within the town. So the driving aspect of this initiative is the barber becoming the signposts, and of course in collaboration with the barbershop to make it a place where you walk in and you know, I'm safe here. I can raise my hand and tell my barber who's shaved me for 15 years, come out, sione kama niko power, and this is going on in my life. What do you think? And you'll be doing that from a point of information, because you'll know this space, this guy has been trained and is a mental health ambassador. Moving forward, we want to see this happening nationally. It's a long-term agenda to be able to be part of this conversation.
Yeah. Yes. All right. We cannot afford to not emphasize the role of therapy. Both of you have walked in these shoes. Yes. So as much as we're doing something on our end, you need to go the extra mile to get the help you need.
Exactly.
Speak about that, Keraven, as we close.
So therapy is not what you see on TV. That's the first thing I want to tell you. It's not. If for those guys who watch Suits, this is not Louis. This is not Louis Litt and that German guy. No, it's not. It's a space where you will be helped to understand yourself better. We're not looking for all the answers in the world, but hopefully you'll be able to understand yourself better. Be willing to put in the effort that your psychiatrist, as far as medication goes, is concerned. Take your meds, do not skip a dosage. I have done that, and it's not an experience I'd wish on anyone. When you go to your psychologist, talk about it. It's a safe space by the fact that he's governed by certain laws. So whatever he says, it remains there. Attend your sessions regularly. For those of you who need to have conversations with your parents based on things that they did or trauma that they did, at some point when you feel confident to do it, plug them in.
Exactly.
Plug them in. The reason why I say that is so that all of you are hurting and you just don't know. And if they understand your hurt, they'll be able to explain theirs, and you'll find a bridge and you'll be able to work things out.
And it actually gives life to the psychosocial support that you need, right?
It actually does. I've seen it happen. Thankfully, my mom and my sister are both psychologists. But they can't do that in a family setting.
Yeah.
But we've been able to have very hard conversations. And yeah, so far, I mean, stuff that has happened over 20-something years now is slowly being resolved. And I'm learning about myself every day.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a
and the Kinyozi guy, by the way.
For sure. Go talk to him.
Talk to him?
Yeah, true. It's very, very important.
It's a nice place.
It's a
if
good
you
place
have
to
homeboys,
start.
if you have, let me call them homeboys, if you've got dudes who have been around you for too long, gather up once in a while, don't drink, but talk about what's happening in your lives.
It's the best therapy.
Okay.
Talking.
Talk.
I'm a woman and I can say it works for us. So I pray that moment actually tap into it. Gentlemen, Kerry Kimani and of course Eddie Kimani, thank you for being so open about your lives and also giving inspiration to other men even as they pursue mental wellness. Thank you so much. It has been AM Live Plus. My name is Gladys Gashanja. Remember, NTV Sasa will be coming your way at 11. Of course, a lot more goodness coming in our programming, so do stay with us. I'll see you at 1 p.m.
Molfix breathable surface developed with Airsoft technology is very soft and provides the best Molfix skincare.
I found the best diaper for my baby's sensitive skin.
All babies deserve a high-quality diaper. You should also try Molfix.
Just move into the weekend where there's something for everyone. For relationship, financial, and travel information, grab the Saturday Magazine. For trendy farming practices and the latest in agricultural technology, read Seeds of Gold every Saturday. Get your gossip and entertainment news in The Buzz every Sunday. For updates on lifestyle hacks, read Lifestyle every Sunday. To keep your child entertained, get Young Nation every Sunday, covering your needs.
When it's February, you know it's the month of love. We got a plan for you. Friday 14th at the Hilton Hotel. It's Churchill Show's special Valentine's Edition live recording. A night of love and laughs. It's a night for the two of you. Featuring your favorite Churchill Show comedians. Hosted by Churchill. It's a VIP seating affair and tickets go for 2,000 shillings. Get your advance ticket by dialing *229 *29# on your phone. It's that season again, and love is in the air, and it's a special Churchill Show Valentine's Edition.
One is true love. Hiyo tutaipata biguni, tuache kuitafuta huku duniani.
Friday 14th February at the Hilton Hotel. You got to be there.
Nakuhisi mapenzi ya dhati mpenzi kubalie. Nakuhisi mapenzi ya dhati mpenzi kubalie.
NTV, turning on your world.
Good morning.
morning, everyone. 'Tis the season where we celebrate love, and this week has been all about that. Valentine's Day being around the corner. What should we wear? What should we be thinking about when we're dating? That's what we're discussing this week. But this day specifically, we're talking fashion, but also getting some home decor tips. There's also a nice little giveaway at some point, so you want to watch and pay careful attention so you don't miss that. We are here at Park Inn by Radisson, and my first guest is fashion stylist Zafar from Zafar Fashion. Hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. I have to start off by asking if you have any plans for Valentine's.
Yeah, sure. Apart from telling people how they'll have to dress that day.
Okay, you're on the streets being like, that is not a cute look, or yes, thumbs up that you got it right.
Exactly.
Would you describe yourself as a tough critic, actually, when it comes to what people wear, how they look? Are you quick to kind of be like, those colors don't go well together?
Actually, what to start with, that thing you've knocked on about what people put on, the colors. You know, it's like people have a mentality, Valentine's all about red, you know. Well, it's about red, but sometimes red shouldn't dominate the whole bodies.
Yeah.
That's my perspective of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So first tip from Zafar today, you don't have to feel pressured or that you have to wear red from head to toe. You can spice it up. And we're going to get some tips actually from him in a little bit, some looks as well that he's put together. But first, I want to hear a little bit about your journey as a stylist. When did fashion become apparent to you as a passion?
Actually, it started a long time ago when I was still in high school. I think around Form 5. Yeah, Form 5. I had the passion since school. But now when I finished school, I had to push it out now to do it like professionally.
Yeah.
So professionally, it's like 3 years now since high school.
Yeah.
I've been doing it. Yeah.
And is it styling? Is that the facet that you are most drawn to, or are there other elements of fashion?
Actually, styling.
Is what you like?
Yes, that's my main part.
Yeah. And I know you focus mostly on women's, but touch a little bit on men's as well.
Exactly,
is that right?
yeah. But my main focus is in the women
Yeah.
part. Yeah.
And where did that come from? Was your mother stylish? Was there anyone in your family that was?
Actually, I grew up with my mom and sisters around me. My brothers were all, so I connect more to ladies. Yeah, I know what they like dressing up.
Right.
Yep.
Because your household, it was full of women, and
I
you
think
were,
that's where I started from.
Yeah, from observing the women around you.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get into Valentine's Day.
Okay.
You kind of touched on one myth, and you debunked it. That is, wearing red head to toe is what Valentine's Day is about. But we know it's 2020. You don't have to wear it head to toe.
Exactly.
Red. So what's another tip or another myth that you would share when it comes to dressing up for your loved one on your date, for men and for women?
Okay, my first tip would be, if you're dressing up for the Valentine's, keep it simple, unique, but perfect, you know?
Simple, unique, but perfect.
Exactly.
No pressure.
Yeah, you shouldn't, be on pressure, like, you want to put everything on you,
Yeah.
you just look outstanding.
Right.
Okay, red, represent love. Make sure on what you're putting on, there is a bit of red, yes. Okay, you might even decide to put on red throughout. It's fine. But if you're not able to put on red throughout, you may put on whatever you feel like, but match it up with red. You may put on like the way you're putting on a black. You can hold a red clutch bag. Or some red, a blaze on top. You see, you're matching it up. You're pulling out the love reddish on you, but not necessarily red throughout.
Yeah.
That's my...
But your take, Zafar, is that red should be a part of it. You should have some kind
Red
of...
must be, because...
You think it's a must?
Okay, it's not really a must,
Yeah.
but since red, in this era, it represents the love, that bond of love, and it's the day of loving, I think, you should match some red, a bit of it.
Throw a little red in.
Yes.
Okay.
That don't necessarily red.
Throughout.
Yeah, yes.
Through and through. So let's check out your first outfit. And we have got your model of the day, Hadija. So let her come in, show us what her first look is about. Okay, so take me through this look.
So actually this look, I created this look basing on simplicity looking at someone who didn't have time, like for the past 2 weeks to the Valentine's Day. He had to go rush, get the outfits up.
Yeah, which I think describes most women. I think most like
Yes.
thinking 2 weeks ahead for Valentine's
Exactly.
Day. I think
So I created this look for that someone who had no time, like simple. So I had actually this dress. If you look at it, it's not red, pure red, but I'm matching it up with a red blazer plus the shoes, plus some little, neck accessory. Yes. So you can at least see it's not that much, but at least can pull out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's enough red. That's
the simplicity of a Valentine's.
That's quite a bit of red. And is it something that you think could also go from work to evening dinner, or how would you jazz it up if you were taking it to the evening? Because this feels also very professional, like you're kind of spending your day in the.
Actually, if at all Valentine is to be on a working day, let me see.
Which it is, this Valentine's Day, it's on a Friday.
You can beat this look from the office, then straight, to wherever
dinner.
you're going with
Yeah.
your lover, something like that.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Hadija. So, Zafar, who's inspired you on your journey as a stylist?
Actually, when I landed into Kenya, Brian Babu, you know Brian Babu?
Yes, of course. He's a friend of the show, friend of mine.
I've never met him personally,
Oh, okay.
but he inspires me online. I follow him.
Really? Oh, bless.
So I look at that guy a couple of times. I love the way he does his stuff. Like, yeah,
Wow.
he gets the style that
Yeah. Yeah.
that I can look at.
Right. So, Zafar, I know you've got some celebrity-inspired looks for us today. Why don't you take us through the first one?
Actually, the first look will come from Kim Kardashian. Actually, I looked into that specific outfit for those ladies that love simple, simple dresses on them. Not too short, not too long, but still, pulls out their look. And when you look at that dress, still it's not too long, like to the, but still it's not too short. So for people who like simple things, like simplicity, but still on the trend, I think they should go in for something like that.
Okay. And I like that it's got an oriental touch. I don't know where that dress is traditionally from, but I like that it's also got a different appeal to it. All right, so we're gonna have Hadija come in again and show us her second look, which is all about date night. Honey, you better have worked out if you're wearing a dress like that. Waist snatch, wow, you look gorgeous. So take me through this dress.
Actually, if you look at that dress Kim was putting on, it will have the same concept with this one, though a bit different.
More modest, Kim's
Yes.
is more modest.
So this is not too long, but still not too short, but still has that fancy look. If you look at it, simple, but at least has that classy look. You can easily go out with someone you love for a perfect day like Valentine's.
Yeah. That even looks like a first date outfit because you are bringing it. You look amazing. All right. Thanks, Khadija. So I know there's one more celebrity-inspired look that you had for us today. Tell us about that.
So actually, that's just the way we had talked about the women inside. We looked how they can dress on the Valentine's Day. I think it's better you also look at the, at the men's side. I think if your woman is putting on the red outfits, you don't have to put the red, because the red is already with you, and since you're together, you can just put something simple, or maybe you just add in something little, to put out the red vibe on you, but not necessarily to put on, the red, since your woman now is already in the red.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not too much red. All right.
That's my main concept.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Zafar.
You're welcome.
We've got to take a break. When we come back, we'll meet the F&B manager here, and we'll get to know a little bit about him, but also get to find out about a giveaway that you do not want to miss. We'll be back in a moment.
We applaud Kakamega County for having made some unique effort to try and engage the youth within Kakamega for them to get empowered.
Hii serikali yetu ya kaunti ya Kakamega imetusaidia pakubwa, na naomba sana izidi kuendelea hivyo kwa kuwa itakuwa imesaidia wengi.
The governor, Wycliffe Ambetsa Oparanya, is really at the top of development in Kakamega County, and there's need for even other counties to come and benchmark in Kakamega just to see exactly what is happening.
Seeing other people accomplish great things.
My mom keeps telling me, you're so brave, you're so courageous.
Overcome even greater adversity.
I remember every single moment when I saw her suffering, and I just knew I'm losing my mom.
And hearing their inspirational stories.
If that child cannot talk, if he cannot hear, appreciate that gift.
Gives us hope.
Life will throw so much at you, but just be adaptable.
Crime's the poor, crime is not cool.
Come take this journey with us every Saturday on Unscripted from 8 p.m. only on NTV.
Rachel, you'll be so surprised at what women can do.
This is delicious.
Sometimes I wonder why women hire hitmen to kill their husbands, yet they can just poison their food.
Nimeletewa.
Inaweza kuwa ni Brayo alikujenga. Mimi napenda fungue roho. Mwenyewe ninakukufa mbaya. Nyata usera yako unaweza mchukua, hakuna mahali utanipeleka, umesikia?
Mbona ulipanga hiyo story yote, hiyo wizi yote? Mbona kuna plans gani?
Revenge.
Taratibu Atoll Class is strategically located in Ruiru.
It's available in 1/4 acres and 1/8 of an acre.
Our email is info@taratibu.ke and our cell phone number is 0769 333 333.
Every day, NTV News Team moves you to the center of the action.
The security forces who took part in this operation.
Police are not taking anything to chance.
Moves you to the heart of the story to witness and record history.
Rendering the declared results null and void.
Telling the story of Kenya.
The growing importance of border in Mandera.
Matatus will be on strike.
And beyond.
The politics in the United States capital.
It is the 7th edition of the Global Education taking place in Dubai.
When it comes to business, we crunch the numbers and unpack the detail with the latest information for your investment decision.
It's time to say goodbye to ThisNote and karibu to ThisNote.
In order for the manufacturing sector to be elevated from the ground.
Despite the government's promise to create at least 1.3 million jobs.
Moves you fast, past the planes and trucks to bring you the triumphs and joys of our great men and women.
Moving stories that touch our hearts.
I didn't know that I could go back to school.
The Back to School program has brought hope to these young mothers.
NTV News. News that moves you.
This is Fact Finder from the BBC.
Conspiracy theories and misinformation about coronavirus is spreading fast online. But what is the truth?
A Sierra Leonean journalist tells us the challenges of delinking satirical work from misinformation.
We tell you how Twitter is fighting back against deepfakes and other misinformation.
And did a Kenyan mother thank an atheist society for paying her son's school fees?
How? That doesn't make sense. How?
Well, find out in True or False.
With Lipa na M-Pesa, you get more.
Lipa na M-Pesa.
Every 100 shillings spent on Lipa na M-Pesa earns you an entry into the draw. Do more with Lipa na M-Pesa.
The best part of an adventure was sharing it with people you love. We are going to have the best time. I made a summer fun list. Whoa, that's a lot of fun.
The greatest day never goes. Make it last forever. Put it on repeat. The greatest day. That's so many days. Everyone.
I'm gonna go snorkeling. I just invented a new sport. #SistersRock.
In your paper this week, America's fears. China and Russia growing influence in Africa gives the United States sleepless nights. An East African enigma. Why Moi has left an indelible mark in the region. Talos wars, Uganda and Kenya's sorrows. UK oil exploration firm financial troubles dim prospects for quick exploitation of petroleum discoveries. The return of Lissu. Behind the scene plan for Tanzania opposition politicians' homecoming. Plus our opinion leaders. Silencing the guns. Africa leaders must use AU summit to broker long-term ceasefire by Elisa Jobson. Off the bucket list. The biggest losers in Trump's fresh travel bans. Magazine. The magazine. Saving the Mara Serengeti ecosystem. Masai Mara is green again, and the village teams are working to keep it that way. The Outlook. The East African, understanding the region.
Right, left, right, left, right, and turn around.
Welcome back, everybody. We are at Parkin by Radisson, and today we're joined by the F&B manager, and his name is Chandra Shah. And before we get into, what to expect about this season, I want to find out a little bit more about you and your journey and how you got to come to this position. So, have you always been interested in hospitality in this industry?
Yeah, it takes me back to 15 years ago, over 15 years ago when I went to study in Switzerland. And that is where my journey began. Yeah. I studied there for a little over 3 years. Thereafter, I moved to America for 5 years to work there. Worked there in a very large resort. After that, I came back home and I joined Villa Rosa Kempinski. And thereafter, my journey in Kenya started. I stepped out of Kenya for about a year to do a pre-opening in Oman. Yeah. And then I came back and I joined Parkin as an F&B manager here.
Okay. So what have been the shifts that you've noticed in the 15 years that you've kind of been in the industry, whether it's in studying or actively participating? What are some of the changes that you've noticed when it comes to celebrating seasons like Valentine's Day?
I think there is more focus not just on the preparation and the look and feel of restaurants and bars in anywhere in the world, but now more focus is going into giving a complete experience when it comes to food, when it comes to drinks, the full experience from the moment the guests arrive into their location, be it a hotel or a restaurant.
And before you felt it seemed more so, here's a meal, good night.
Exactly, right. And here's a rose, that's it.
Oh, here's a rose.
Of course.
Yeah, but now you get like 2 million shilling, dates planned out, and rooms worth like God knows how much, and wines and alcohol worth. Absolutely. So they're trying to make it more. So that's a good tip, actually. If you're thinking of, treating someone special for Valentine's, don't just hand them a present, but try and make it think of every aspect.
Absolutely, making it personal.
Yeah.
bit of it.
Right.
Yes.
And what about culturally? Because you've worked in Oman, you
Sure.
studied in Switzerland, you've worked in America, you said, and you're here now. So are there shifts that you clearly notice when it comes to different cultures and how they celebrate Valentine's?
I think definitely there is a shift in every culture and what they believe in when it comes to Valentine's. But also within cultures, I think some do believe in Valentine's and some don't. However, it's just the season to love and to enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know? So as much as there is a shift, I think there is just a day put aside to have an extra bit of fun.
Yeah, and I get that.
Yeah.
And is the interest still there when it comes to the audience? Like, do you still get, you know, having worked over the years in different hotels, do you still see like, the numbers coming in to celebrate and dine? And
I think, yeah, definitely. It's no longer a couple's or a boyfriend and a girlfriend experience or a husband and wife. It's now all about giving it a day put aside for fun, be it your partner or your best friend or friends that you haven't seen for a long time. It's just another reason to have some fun.
And I like that. Yeah. It makes sure that you're not excluding all the single ladies and all the single gents.
Exactly.
So that they can just be, you know, call it Palentines and bring your pal, or Galentines and bring your gals, and just enjoy something special. Because before it kind of did leave out a huge group of single people who are like, we're just going to watch the rest of you.
Exactly.
Spend money.
Sure.
Are flowers a big part of it for you in the hotel business?
Yes, absolutely. I think flowers plays a huge part, but at the end, it's the full experience. As long as you're able to keep it vibrant and exciting and creative, and just keep on start a trend.
Yeah.
You know, don't follow a trend.
Yeah.
Start your trend, and you never know where it takes you.
Yeah.
So,
what have you got planned for this season? Now that it's just, you know, it's very close. Valentine's is just around the corner.
Sure.
So what interesting things have you guys got planned for this season?
Okay, so our restaurant at the lobby level, live-in restaurant, will be having a dinner, a set menu for a couple. It will cost about 9,000 shillings. It's a set menu with a welcome drink, along with a homemade candy bar made by our pastry chef, and a little something from us. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
A nice little treat there, surprise treat. Okay. And I know that there's something else that you've got that is less about like the intimate dinner, but more about let's hang out.
Yeah.
It's Friday evening, let's hang out. Well, tell me about that.
Absolutely. So while the restaurant is going to be celebrating the lovey-dovey Valentine's with the live band, what's going to be happening upstairs here at the attic is there's going to be a DJ, there will be cocktails, there'll be fun, there'll be music, and just a space for people to have some fun.
Yeah, a good time with the great view of the city. Absolutely. And I can only imagine, I mean, because we obviously shoot here in the morning, but I can imagine in the evening it just transforms. It takes a different appeal. All right, now I know I'm going to meet one of your colleagues in just a short while, and they'll like give us tips on how to set up the table for Valentine's. If you're one of those who's going to be celebrating it at home, either because you know, it's that time, you know, budgets are real, okay, and we ain't trying to spend too much money, or maybe you just want something intimate, then we're going to get some tips from one of your colleagues. But first, there's a special giveaway.
Yes. So we want to be kind this season.
Yes.
So we have a giveaway for a couple.
Yeah.
Any two people who would be kind enough to share their story of what their best Valentine idea would be.
Yeah.
Tag us.
Yeah.
Parkin_Nairobi Westlands.
Yes.
And we have a dinner for two at Live-In on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, on Valentine's Day. Again, you get 2 tickets. Would I say ticket? Yeah, 2 tickets to dinner here at Parkin on Valentine's Day. And it could be a couple, it could just be you and your bestie, and you come and you enjoy your evening, and all you have to do is comment on a picture that will be on Living with S's Instagram page. That's at Living with S on Instagram. Comment and make sure to tag Parkin. If you do not tag Parkin, that entry is not considered. So you have to tag them and just let us know what has been the ultimate Valentine's Day date, what would that be? What would it look like? And tag parkin_NRB Westland.
And
Yay!
just to add on to that, we'll throw in a bottle of red wine.
Oh!
Yes.
Oh, I can see a lot of people being like, okay, now where's my phone? Let me find that picture. I love that. Thank you for treating our audience.
Pleasure.
All
Anytime.
right. So now I get to meet your colleagues.
Yes.
So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get to learn how to set up a dinner table so we can just jazz things up at home, because we deserve a good time too at home. We'll be back in a moment.
Get an 8 acre plot at Kenya shillings 150,000 for cash buyers or 175,000 for installment buyers. Welcome to our open day on 15th February 2020. SMS plot to 21595.
Je, maumivu ya kichwa na kukosesha amani? Kaluma Strong hutuliza maumivu ya kichwa, maumivu ya mwili na hata huondoa joto jingi mwilini. Kaluma Strong ina aspirin kama kiungo. Maumivu yakizidi, muone daktari.
Who wants to answer? Mary?
Mary has a toothache.
Oh, I see. And who knows why?
Because her tooth is too big.
No, it might be a hole in her tooth called a cavity. That's why I brush twice a day using Colgate.
Imagine this is your tooth and these are food acids that cause cavities. Colgate with calcium and fluoride helps prevent cavities
For maximum cavity protection.
and now available in a 12-gram sachet for fresh breath. Only 15 shillings.
The three sides of Anna.
Don't you ever suddenly feel an explosion of joy bursting in your chest for no reason? Or don't you ever suddenly feel sad and you don't know why? Do you know why that is?
Already explained to me that there's nothing really wrong with her.
That's the problem with men. You never really cared about anything.
No, it's you women who turn absolutely anything into a tragedy.
But if Ana Lucia is dreaming about those things, then that is your fault.
Now why would you say that?
It is the truth. She does not find in you the love of a mother.
The three sides of Anna.
Sour Shower has never been better with the new look Sour. Now with a new formulation too that will leave you feeling fresh for longer, while the soap lasts even longer.
New Blue Band Peanut Butter. Made with 100% pure peanuts. And a good source of omega-6. Grow healthy and happy kids with new Blue Band Peanut Butter.
Top spot ndo mwanzo tu.
So much football.
It is a chance to enjoy Kenyan football.
Crunch time for the Kenya Sevens rugby team. Why Formula One?
I'm interested in cars.
The speeds that those cars attain is crazy. But I'm supposed to be a fan.
Asante sana Kigogo, karibu sijapata vizuri sana. Lugha gani hiyo ya Kimayai? But good to see you there.
This week on The Trend, Kenya's finest ethnic group, the Sassy Nandi, all the way from Nigeria, Kiss Daniel, Uganda's hitmaker Big Trail, Maybelline bringing beauty to The Trend.
The Trend in association with Maybelline New York.
Fit Me Foundation from Maybelline New York. Fits your unique tone and texture. Blurs pores. Stop shine. For your most natural matte. Fit Me Matte and Poreless, only from Maybelline New York.
The water in the lake is not safe.
Uchafu yote nakuja mpaka baadi
samaki kupatikana inakuwa ngumu.
Hatukunywi maji.
We are not releasing any wastewater into the environment.
Tumechoka na kupiga kelele kwa watu ya prison.
Sewer connectivity is still very low.
Government is aware of their production. Government needs to monitor where they empty their waste.
This was undercover camera. Are we going there?
We were given this lake and we're just not looking after it properly. When God comes and says, where is my lake? We say, here it is.
In your paper this week, America's fears. China and Russia growing influence in Africa gives the United States sleepless nights. An East African enigma. Why Moi has left an indelible mark in the region. Talos wars, Uganda and Kenya's sorrows. UK oil exploration firm financial troubles dim prospects for quick exploitation of petroleum discoveries. The return of Lissu. Behind the scene plan for Tanzania opposition politicians' homecoming. Plus our opinion leaders. Silencing the guns. Africa leaders must use AU summit to broker long-term ceasefire by Elisa Jobson. Off the bucket list. The biggest losers in Trump's fresh travel bans. Magazine. The magazine. Saving the Mara Serengeti ecosystem. Masai Mara is green again, and the village teams are working to keep it that way. The Outlook. The East African, understanding the region.
When it's February, you know it's the month of love. We got a plan for you. Friday 14th at the Hilton Hotel. It's Churchill Show special Valentine's edition live recording. A night of love and laughs. It's a night for the two of you. Featuring your favorite Churchill Show comedians. Hosted by Churchill. It's a VIP sitting affair and tickets go for 2,000 shillings. Get your advance ticket by dialing *229 *29# on your phone.